Living in Japan as a foreigner. The hidden struggles of outsiders. I work with Japanese businesses, and the thing that infuriates me the most is that nobody will disagree with you in a meeting, even if you're wildly wrong and about to make a huge mistake, even if it will wreck their business, even if it's objectively a terrible idea. If you have a meeting coming up with 30 people in it, you need to have at least 30 one-on-ones ahead of time in order to get everyone's true thoughts. And you can't mention any other one-on-ones. If you say, "Oh, I met with Bob and he said XYZ, then you've just missed out on getting any kind of real opinion out of the one person you're meeting with. They'll shut down. They're terrified of disagreement. Someone told me Japanese companies have a role called the loud American whose specific task is to disagree with people publicly. I've always wondered if it's true because if it is, I find it very funny. Oh, it's true. I studied law in Japan, and one of my professor's jobs before working at my school was to be the American during mediations and negotiations. Apparently, many American-bought Japanese companies that were meeting with regular Japanese companies started to realize that people kept doing roundabouts during negotiations, which made meetings that should have been 1 hour take more than 3. Thus, Americans were being hired to be obnoxious and cut through the niceties. The Americans were told not to be rude, but to stop the talk and consideration. I've lived in Japan for 12 years and counting. Deep relationships are hard to come by. People don't often ask inquisitive questions for the sake of protecting someone's privacy. A big negative of that is that most relationships are very surface level. In addition to this, people usually don't hang out at each other's houses. All gatherings and meetings must be planned well in advance, and things feel more like events rather than casual get-togethers. Ultimately, the lack of deep connection where you really get to know people is hard. People are so good at putting an outward face on and covering up their true selves. Once I started dating there, I felt I was more engaged and invited to small gatherings and hangouts that weren't events. But it did take finding and meeting a partner and then helping being that medium for daily hangouts with other people beyond scheduled events. It's so futuristic in a way, but also so behind in everything bureaucratic or anything related to paperwork. No online systems, no chance to go in person, just mail. And God forbid you mail the wrong person or even the department. They'll mail back to do it again with the right addresses. It can be maddening. Yeah, I know some people who'd find the lack of in-person confrontation very ideal, at least on a surface level. It sounds very lonely, to be honest, even to a less socially inclined person like me. Japan is a duality in so many ways. If you live there for a while, the more superficial layer starts to chip away, and you start to see some really interesting things. I really try to look at it as not better or worse, just different, but that can be really hard at times. Japanese people are generally very respectful, kind, welcoming, polite, and interested in other cultures. Traveling there is safe, and it's refreshing to be treated so well by default, but under the surface there's deeply ingrained misogyny, racism, and ageism. It doesn't necessarily manifest in day-to-day interactions, but stay there long enough and you'll see its impact. For example, it's important in Japan for tea to be served to guests, but it doesn't matter how much authority a woman has. If she's the only woman around, she prepares the tea. I visited a company for work where the department head was a woman and her employees were all men. She prepared the tea. The only time a man served me tea was when there were literally no women around, and then it was the youngest man's job. Racism usually manifests as a genuine curiosity, and if you look different, you can feel like a movie star. You will hear constant surprise that you can use chopsticks or speak even a word of Japanese, but that's pretty innocuous, if tiresome. But if you try to get a driver's license, open a bank account, get a job, or buy a car, you'll see the rampant systemic racism in action. Westerners also love the extremely punctual and efficient public transportation, perfect queuing, polite customer service, and general quietness in public spaces. But all of that comes from extremely rigid social standards. You will do a perfect job at work to make sure the trains are always on time, you will queue respectfully, you will be quiet. They have a saying that the nail that sticks up will be hammered down. Conformity to the group is mandatory, and if you wish to deviate, you have to do it in the accepted spaces. It results in bonkers artwork, wild after-work parties, crazy bedroom culture and stuff, because when they're allowed to let loose, they absolutely do. But it's very different from Western culture and can be a difficult trade-off. There's a lot more stuff like that. A kind of utopian service that visitors tend to appreciate, built on top of difficult or even dark concessions of freedom for the individual. The importance of personal freedom and liberty in all areas of life is what I grew to appreciate about America after living there for a long time. I still struggle with those trade-offs. For example, the US is so focused on individual liberty that we're basically fine with frequent massacres of our younger generations, and the grocery store is an absolute main character syndrome nightmare. I wish we could find a middle ground of mutual respect, but also fundamental importance of individual freedom. I work for a Japanese engineering company, and the bureaucracy is definitely something else. Also, it's considered rude to change someone else's design, so if something's wrong, you don't fix it, you basically put a new design on top of it that compensates for the error. Imagine the engineering design equivalent of painting over mold. Japan's a weird mix of being in 2050 while also being in 1950. So much stuff still requires physical paperwork, but most vending machines let you pay by NFC or debit card, and the trains are so damn efficient. As the saying goes, Japan has been in the year 2000 since 1980. The salary, even adjusted for cost of living, it's pretty low. Best year of my life, and I learned a lot, but man was it a pain to budget at times. That's why Nintendo made a Japan-only Switch 2 that's $345 compared to everywhere else with $449 and the current exchange rates, obviously. They thought their Japanese customers wouldn't be able to justify $500 on a Switch 2 because of how much lower salaries are. Makes perfect sense after seeing the crap show Sony created with the PlayStation 5 and Pro. Japan was roasting the heck out of Sony, along with anyone else outside the USA, for having the gall to charge almost $1,000 for a PlayStation 5 Pro with a disk drive. I'm going to say Japan doesn't protect a lot of basic civil rights very well. You can be discriminated against for disabilities in employment and even in healthcare choices. If you end up in a lawsuit, the court is extremely reluctant to make a judgment and will try to force an agreement even when the case should be clearly in favor of one side. If you're charged with the crime, you will be convicted. But not all crimes are charged. So if you're the victim of a crime and the police or prosecutor don't want to take the case to court, for fear of being in the tiny percentage that aren't convicted, the perpetrator will just go free. This explains Japan's very high statistic of people apparently self-deleting, because that's what they file deaths under when they can't prosecute a murder. An American friend of mine worked as an attorney in Japan. It drove him nuts that the first responsibility was to society and appearances above the interests of their client. They're too nice, meaning they're not honest, they won't say what's actually on their minds, and everyone appears as a mindless drone. In actuality, they're just trying to survive while being taken advantage of by a system that rewards servitude and not personality. There's this lady on TikTok that does a video series about what it's like being a foreigner in Japan. She's a teacher and she's gotten a summer job at one point. Apparently they made her apologize for leaving and tried to force her to stay, and apparently some companies will try to sabotage your next job. Also, there's an issue with women living on the first floor of an apartment building. I don't know if it's a regional thing or not, but dryers are not something that everyone had access to, so they hang their laundry, and the landlord warned her about young men stealing undies from her little patio if she was living on the first floor. It's such a weird country. I love the concept of Japan, but I have no idea how I'd feel living there. I've seen some videos of people owning shops with like a table of goods sitting outside their shop, saying they leave them out overnight with no fear of theft, because it's seen as dishonorable, so nobody steals. But then on the other side of the coin, undies get stolen from someone's patio. They've got top-class manners, but they've also got elite-level preverts. Maybe that's the ingrained gender bias thing we've mentioned earlier. Perhaps they've just interpreted this as sort of a boys being boys thing that isn't worth prosecuting, so people just kind of accept it. Pretty wild to me. Then again, it's the sort of thing we'd laugh off in a 90s hijinks movie. You need to use transparent trash bags and you need to take them out at 6 a.m. You're not allowed to take them out the evening before. You're not allowed to use a trash can, but just have to haul out that disgusting transparent bag. And if you mess that up, you'll need to have the trash bag inside your house, waiting for you to get up early the next day. And the schedule is all over the place. And disclaimer, not all Japan is the same, but it is a known issue. In my town, we had to write our names on our transparent trash bags. One fateful garbage day, I forgot to write my name on mine, and that evening the garbage man knocked on my door to return my garbage to me. He explained that I hadn't written my name on it. Feeling clever, I replied, "Well, how do you know it's mine then?" "It has English things in it," he replied. My buddy is Vietnamese and grew up in Southern California and then moved to Japan for work. He always felt SoCal was a little racist, but it was nothing like Japan. In Japan, Vietnamese are often uneducated immigrant workers and are seen as the lowest class. My buddy's Japanese wasn't amazing, it was his third language, and he dressed like a California skater. He'd be refused service at restaurants, not be allowed into stores, and called boat trash. He eventually learned to dress in expensive suits and only speak English, playing up his Americanness. He still had an old woman ask, "Who taught a dummy like you English?" I lived in Japan for 2 years and I remember a local telling me that fair-skinned Japanese people looked down on dark-skinned Japanese people. Not all Japanese people are like that, I'm sure, but he said it was pretty common. Japan can do things 3 ways. Amazingly well, antiquated, or absolutely weird and creepy. I've heard from friends that their online banking is just awful, and that many banks are completely defeated by the concept of middle names, which was a common thing among non-Japanese living in Japan way before these systems were even designed, which means they actively decided to ignore the needs of non-Japanese customers. But yeah, you sign up with your name, it doesn't accept the middle name, and then when you go to verify your ID, it doesn't fully match the documents because their systems didn't accept it, and now you need to start all over again and are probably flagged for potential fraud at that one bank. Well, all of these others are pretty accurate, I can say. Funny anecdote, I taught at a cram school a long time ago before getting a gig at a university. When I told the cram school owner that I was leaving, several months in advance by the way, she interrogated me over where I was going. I reluctantly told her about the university gig, and she scoffed at me and made some very rude, passive-aggressive comments about how people who work at universities have to be smart, but I guess they'll let any foreigner in. By the way, she was incredibly nice and friendly before this. The last 2 months I worked at that place were hell, to be honest, and I actually ended up leaving early. I want to clarify I'm a woman and I chose to move here long term, and overall I enjoy living here. I feel very safe and I have much better healthcare and quality of life in Japan than in the US where I'm from. I'm able to live comfortably in a major city, but I believe in order to enjoy your time here, you need to make cultural sacrifices. My personality in Japanese is totally different than in English. I put up with things that would send American women into a coma. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I lived in rural Japan for a year as an assistant language teacher. A downside that nobody's talked about so far? How about not treating roads or sidewalks in the winter? I didn't have a car, and I relied on getting around by bike and on foot. The first time it started melting and refreezing, it was a total crap show. Everything was covered in half an inch of ice. I fell over a lot, despite being Minnesotan. When I was in Sapporo one time, I took a taxi and was making small talk with the driver about how the roads were so icy. He assured me it was totally safe, and immediately after that, as he tried to stop at a red light, he wildly fishtailed back and forth due to the ice. We both laughed about that. Seriously though, for a country with so many elderly folk who could easily break a bone in a fall, I don't understand the logic behind this. Bonus fun fact, in small towns, folk are much more likely to smile, wave, and say hello. Nearly everyone, including at work, was also very accepting of my forearm tattoo. Here's a numbered list of my life here. First, I'm 6'3". I smack my head on doorways and those train bars at least once a day. I always check those entryways have got clearance. Second, taking off your shoes to enter office buildings and schools and having to carry around an extra pair of footwear because your feet are too big to fit the provided slippers. 3. Going to the dentist, they'll often take multiple sessions to fix one tooth, and sometimes the work is less than quality. 4th is the deer-in-the-headlights look Japanese get when interacting with you because you might be the only foreigner they've ever seen. It honestly must be like what being a celebrity's like without the rich part. I had a bunch of high school girls pretend to take an English class so they could sneak my picture and then run out of the school giggling. 5. The Japanese are hard to read by body language. I prided myself on being able to read people. That went out the window in Japan. They could literally be full of the fires of hell with their hatred for you and you'd never know. Similarly, they might like you and ignore you until the day you leave and they get you a present. 6. Upsetting wah. As a big loud American, I thoroughly rupture the wah of my environment. 7. Gaslighting on the internet. See a video of Japanese going up the stairs in an orderly fashion on Reddit and every comment is, "Japanese are so orderly and polite." When in reality, if you were going up the stairs during rush hour, you'd better keep your head on a swivel as you'll be body checked into Bolivia. And finally, 8. Polite doesn't mean nice. Once again, polite doesn't mean nice. No, it does not. Ingrained manners does not mean that the person's intentions or opinions can't be bad. All of the soft-spoken little old white ladies I know who have etiquette out the wazoo, but are capable of nonetheless having horrific opinions, are living proof of that. As a black woman, being the product of mixed interest and racism. I joined dating apps when I first came here and matched with many Japanese men. However, 80% of them were either 1. Really into stereotypically black culture like hip-hop and reggae or soca, 2. Were generally rebellious, so they only dated black or non-Japanese girls because dating a black girl is the most rebellious thing one can do against one's family, apparently, and 3. Really wanted to try a black woman once, so they were just looking to hook up. These messages upon matching were typically things like, "Are you aggressive in bed?" or "I hear women from the Caribbean are really good in bed," or can you twerk/whine. It was hard to distinguish who was like this because it was the most salaryman-looking guys who were the freaks. The worst, and the reason I stopped matching with Japanese men, was one guy I went on a date with who couldn't stop talking. On and on about how he loves black culture, the women, and asked me a million questions about the Caribbean, specifically Carnival, and the raunchy nature of it. That's not the worst part. We went driving around the city, and every chance he got, he'd try to touch my hair and remark on how it was wild and exciting. I think if you exist in a space that's a little exotic but still in the comfort zone, like I'm slim and not dark, which is things Asian men prefer, but I have huge natural hair so I'm still unambiguously black, Japanese men will put you in a very uncomfortable box. It's hard to meet a partner here because it's either a weird novelty to borderline preverts, or foreign guys who want to date Asian girls only. It's not my story, but a school friend of mine who was obsessed with Japan all his life basically achieved his dream and moved over there. He married a Japanese woman and got a job with Bandai Namco. After 10 years, he practically fled the country with his wife and had almost nothing but bad things to say. He said it was basically impossible to be truly accepted as a foreigner, the work culture is beyond insane, and the police and government have a frightening level of power. He highly recommends it as a holiday destination, but not to live. Bandai Namco, like many game companies, are notoriously horrible to work for, which is why they're always hiring for nearly every conceivable position and are constantly pumping money into recruitment agencies. Bandai Namco appears in nearly every single advertisement from multiple agencies. I'm sorry it sucked for your friend, but they've worked for a notoriously bad example. It might not just be Japan's fault. Most of the stuff is talked about a lot, so I don't know. There's the ridiculous work culture that emphasizes appearance of effort over results. There's the normalized cheating. I remember at work someone whose wife would only give him enough cash to buy lunch so he wouldn't spend it in exotic dance clubs. So he switched up his lifestyle, only ate cheap instant ramen, and created his own secret fund to go and see working girls. For my part, being on the receiving end of xenophobia and racism was a new experience for a Caucasian. And then there were the Byzantine trash collection rules. I saw someone else here saying underperforming executives for a Japanese country were sent to work for the US branch as a punishment. They loved how much more laid back everything was once they got here. My wife is Japanese. We don't live there, but we go very often and we stay with her family in Fukui for a month or so a year. Here are my picks. First, the really bizarre tradition about not complimenting other people's children for being cute. It's not a politeness or protection thing, but one of vanity. Everyone thinks everyone else's kids are ugly. I got made fun of for calling a kid cute. Even old women don't share pictures of their grandchildren with each other. Second, zero physical affection towards your own kids. No hugs, nothing. I have to refrain from hugging my own kid when there. Third, the cheating. Only 2 of my wife's 30 close friends are loyal to their husbands. Lawsuits for cheating spouses are a thing in Japan, which has a good number of my wife's friends either paying or receiving claims for adultery. 4, everything being covered in plastic despite draconian trash rules. And 5, worst of all, is the ineffective waxy or plastic napkins. I've lived in Japan for 4 years, and working in a Japanese company has given me 2 answers. First, the time zone is terrible. In summer, it's light before 4 a.m. and gets dark at 6 p.m. The whole country should move the clocks an hour back. And then there's the reverse culture shock. When I go back to the UK, I sometimes catch myself thinking my friends and family are self-centered, loud, and can't read the air. By British standards, they're absolutely none of these things, but Japan's emphasis on harmony and indirect communication has started rubbing off on me. I'm worried this could get worse the longer I stay. That in many aspects where the Japanese seem way ahead of other countries, it's because they're comically behind everyone else in some other aspect. Japan didn't have the credit card culture North America and Europe have, so that's the reason Japanese cell phones got tap to pay in the late 90s. Those phones were linked to something like a PayPal account that had to be manually topped up in cash at a convenience store, so not as easy as it looked. The lack of credit cards also often meant paying in cash. Japanese people wanting first-class airline tickets thought nothing of going to a bank, withdrawing $15,000 in cash, and taking it to the nearest JAL office to buy tickets in person rather than online. Faxing may still live on in Japan, and if it's dead, it will be somewhat recent, let me tell you. It was also common for Japanese boxes to look at every fax that came in, so no making fun of your boss via fax. I know their IT is generally way behind the US. A few years ago, it wasn't uncommon to see Windows 98 in offices still. Okay, somewhat stereotypically, I kind of thought that at least in terms of their tech, they were more or less up to date or better, but this may be too many generalizations about the place in films and video games. We're often shown Japan as like a technological wonderland. Lesson learned there. Also, Windows 98. Coming here when you aren't young can leave you with few friend options outside of other foreigners. People aged 30 plus already have little time for their close friend group and aren't really looking to add new faces to the group. On top of that, most foreigners don't stick around too long, so Japanese people are hesitant to invest time into building any sort of meaningful friendship with you. So you try to make friends with other foreigners, but lo and behold, what those Japanese people were afraid of was right, and your foreigner friends leave one by one. If you're not an extremely outgoing person, you can find yourself very isolated rather quickly. Getting ghosted by an entire culture when you mess up one tiny social cue. My friend talked about how different the culture was there when he got back from the army. He says his biggest cultural issue was how indirect people were when they weren't happy with something you do. How judgmental people are, judging how people dress or how they talk or what they look like. I don't care personally, but man, it's lame how much grown adults can't get out of a high school bully mindset. School kids spend all of their time at school and don't get to spend much time with their dads. My barber in Japan had a young son. Once he was telling me how his son was about to start school and he was having his last camping trip with him. I asked him why he couldn't do that in the school holidays. Apparently, kids go to school for 6 days of the week, and during the holidays they're expected to do school activities. He said his son would be tied up with school stuff until he graduated high school. Most landlords won't rent to foreigners. Most banks won't give you a credit card. Police can kidnap you for 2 weeks without having any proven charge and won't let you contact anyone. Yen has dropped and salaries are stagnant. Glass ceiling for foreigners getting promotions to upper levels. Something that does come up, but I feel like most people don't internalize it, is just how xenophobic Japanese natives are. As a culture, they never really left behind the "we are beacons of civilization and everyone else is barbarians" mindset. Recently, there was an anime that blew up in a huge way. Super popular, super fast. Solo Leveling. It's based in South Korea. The Japanese version changes all of the names and locations to ones in Japan because the Japanese audience won't accept that it takes place in South Korea and that the main character is Korean and not Japanese. It'd be like if the American localization named the main character Stanley and they called all of the cities things like Dallas.
What fan theories have blown your mind with their devastating logic? I like the one about the Rugrats. Ever wondered how Angelica could talk to the babies? Angelica is the only one who can talk to the babies because they're a figment of her imagination. She's spoiled, sad, and lonely because her mother is constantly working and has no time for her. Her relationship with her dad is superficial and unsubstantial. No real love is ever shown to her. So how did it come about that Angelica would have to imagine these babies? Tommy died soon after childbirth, a fact reflected by Stu never leaving the basement, inventing toys that his son will never play with. Chucky died in the car crash along with his mum, also reflected in the actions of his father. The crash has made him a pathetic nervous wreck most of the time. Most interesting is Phil and Lil. There never were any twins. There was just one baby. However, this baby was a stillborn, and Angelica never knew the sex of the stillborn, so she invented twins of different genders. Sadly, Angelica never uses her imaginary friends to comfort or entertain her. Instead, she's mean and nasty to them. She's invented this relationship with these babies so that she can vent her frustrations on being a spoiled, lonely brat who has seen much hardship from these unfortunate parents. Frustrations that can't be satisfied by a typical childhood relationship with a doll, albeit a Cynthia one. You've definitely made me want to take a second look at that show now. I read a theory about Courage the Cowardly Dog that said Courage is actually a normal dog and he sees the world through a dog's eyes. All the villains in the show are just normal people, but to a little dog, they seem scary. They don't actually live in the middle of nowhere, but since his owners are too old to take him out for walks, he only knows what's around his immediate property, and everything beyond that is nothing because he's never seen it. The story of Aladdin is made up by the salesman at the beginning to persuade you to buy the lamp. This one isn't really a theory as much as it is kind of the way the movie goes. You just choose whether or not you want to believe the actual story. Doctor Who. The Doctor's name is a word of power, something that was introduced to the series in Moffat's Series 3 episode The Shakespeare Code. What does the Doctor's name do? It unlocks the Time War. This is the reason he trusts no one but himself to know his own name. During the ending of Forest of the Dead, the 10th Doctor also states to River that there could be only one way she could have known his name. This is also the reason why the Silents are terrified of the Doctor's name. And why not? It would release the Daleks and the Time Lord from the locked Time War. Willy Wonka knew those children would die in his factory. After Augustus gets sucked up the chute, they all hop on board the boat through the Tunnel of Doom. The boat doesn't have 2 extra vacant seats though. It was designed with prior knowledge that they would lose 2 participants before that point. Later, they drive a cream-spewing car with only 4 seats. Did they have another car waiting in the garage in case the others made it? Of course not. Willy Wonka uses children to make candy. You kinda took a dark turn at the end of that one there, but there's a lot of fan theories around this movie, and a lot of them do tend to be dark. I like the idea that at the end of The Thing in 1982, when Kurt Russell offers Keith David the bottle and he drinks out of it, that the bottle is actually filled with gasoline from one of the Molotovs he was throwing earlier. Since the creature wouldn't understand what gasoline tastes like, it wouldn't spit it out. The original Scooby-Doo series is set after a horrible economic depression. Everything is abandoned and falling apart, and all of the villains are people who would normally be really respected. Professors, museum curators, celebrities, who have fallen into hard times just like everyone else. How many times have the gang helped someone not go out of business? This one is my personal theory. That 70s show is a vague sequel to Happy Days. At the end of Happy Days, Richie and Ralph go off to the Korean War, or at least they're training for it. Fonzie stays behind. At this point, you must remember that the Fonz was always the person who kept Richie cool. Flash forward 20 years. Richie, now Red, has become bitter after the war, and without the catalyst that was Arthur Fonzarelli, his friendship with fool neighbor Bob, or Ralph, has fallen apart. Happy Days was made in the 70s and set in the 50s. That 70s show was in the 90s and set in the 70s. I do agree that 70s show was definitely trying to capture the same lightning in a bottle that Happy Days had, just for a newer generation. You're definitely onto a connection there in terms of audience appeal and general timeline, but I don't think that the characters carry over in any way. The existence of SpongeBob and his strange friends is the result of radiation from nuclear arms testing that was performed at the Bikini Atoll in the late 40s and early 50s. Since they live under the atoll, the town is known as Bikini Bottom. In the beginning of 2001: A Space Odyssey, a black screen is displayed while music plays for a few minutes before the film starts. It's believed that this is the monolith tilted 90 degrees and taking up the entire screen, as if the entire film is a technological and evolutionary advancement that Kubrick is bestowing us. Sean Connery's character in The Rock is actually James Bond. He got caught spying on America and was hidden away in various prisons. "This man does not exist in the United States or Great Britain," says FBI Director Womack. This ties in with the theories of James Bond being a code name for different agents. One that hasn't been brought up yet is Blade Runner. Ridley Scott finally closed the debate a few years ago as to whether or not Deckard was actually a replicant, and he totally was. But to take this one step further, he was a replicant implanted with the memories of Gaff, Edward James Olmos's character. Gaff was actually the top Blade Runner, but was sidelined due to some injury or illness, hence the cane. So Deckard was created and implanted with Gaff's memories to continue the search for Roy Batty and his friends. This explains why Gaff never really does anything aside from drive Deckard around, and why he treats him with such contempt. Gaff's origami also hint at Deckard's true nature, as they seem to demonstrate an insight into what Deckard is feeling. A chicken when he's feeling scared, a stickman with a boner when he's about to meet the smoking hot Rachel, and the unicorn from Deckard's recurring dream. It also helps explain the compliment Gaff pays Deckard at the end of the film. After he apparently hovered above the building and watched Batty nearly kill Deckard without intervening, he lands and says, "You've done a man's job," which is the highest praise you could give a replicant. When it's all laid out like that, I hardly even think it should be considered a theory. It's just clearly what was going on if you take a few minutes to think about it. Okay, let's be honest, Blade Runner is kind of a mess. There's way too many different cuts, and as a result, we have all kinds of fan theories coming up around this one. Always that Deckard's a replicant, which apparently was confirmed that I didn't know. Personally, my favorite book of all time is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is the book that this movie is based off of. If you have a remote interest in Blade Runner, take all this conspiracy stuff, put it off to the side, and read the book objectively, without taking all of this movie stuff into account. Deckard is a completely different character with completely different motivations in the book. The Jetsons and the Flintstones are two portions of the same society. The people living in Bedrock are actually members of a far future society, one may say post-human, that have rejected the day-to-day electronic assistants to live like their long-dead ancestors did, or at least what they think they lived like. This explains the talking animals. They're just synthetic creations. It's been so long since any actual animal lived that didn't have human communication bred and written into it that the ferals don't realize how silly it is to be talking with creatures that didn't even exist alongside early humans. How Garfield is actually dying of starvation, and just imagine John and Odie. There was a reference to this in a Halloween-themed comic. Garfield woke up in a condemned and abandoned house. He calls out for Odie and John, but there's no answer. He then wills the illusion back on himself and continues his delusions about his family. To all you Potterheads out there, when Sybil Trelawney predicted Harry was born in midwinter, she was laughed at, as Harry's birthday was in July. However, it is a known fact that, spoiler alert, Voldemort's soul is inside Harry. It's possible that Professor Trelawney was detecting the part of Voldemort inside Harry as Voldemort was born mid-December. Pinky and the Brain. One is a genius, the other's insane. Brain constantly plans to take over the world, suggesting he's insane. Pinky often finds ways to ruin these plans. So, who is the genius? You just gave me a whole new appreciation for Pinky. I remember there was a pretty good one about how R2-D2 was Luke's father, and this of course was before Empire Strikes Back came out. Luke's father was mortally wounded by Vader. His brain was removed from his body and placed in life support inside a robot. This is why C-3PO is so worried about R2's operational status. C-3 knows that R2 has biological components. Turns out, Luke, who got very little Jedi training, isn't all that great. It's his Jedi father inside of R2 every time. Think about it. Early on, when Luke does something with the Force, R2 is always there, except for the one time on Hoth. And what is R2 doing at that time? Deploying a long-range Force antenna we never see again. This one is obviously completely invalidated by, 30 years of the franchise now, but I thought it was fun. Archer TV show. Whenever someone eats at the Chinese restaurant and brings home a tinfoil swan full of leftovers, they're going to betray the company. Episode 1, when Archer wants to break into the mainframe and erase and alter his financial records. Episode 9, Lana is going to join Odin. And there's an episode where Cyril takes a bribe at the restaurant and his bribe money is in the swan. I'm pretty sure this theory is out there somewhere else, but I've yet to find it. In the beginning of Finding Nemo, the father imagines one son survived, when in reality his whole family was destroyed. The movie is an allegory of the father's journey through the stages of grief. Denial. He won't let his son go to school because it's not safe. Anger. He scolds his son for venturing out of his control. Bargaining. He puts up with an amnesiac travel buddy to help him find his son. Despair. He sees his son flush down the drain. Acceptance. He learns to let go and let things be the way they are. Almost everyone in the story tells the father he has to let go of his son. His travels take him to the land down under, aka the underworld. The movie ends with him saying goodbye as his son visually disappears into the void. And the kicker? Nemo means nobody in Latin. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Will was murdered on the basketball court in West Philly. The taxi driver is God. That's why we felt the cab was different or rare. God takes him to heaven where he lives in a mansion with his wealthy aunt and uncle and slowly works out his issues and hardships. At the end of Kevin Smith's Dogma, Bethany Sloan, the last scion, i.e. God's chosen to continue his good works on earth as a last resort should there need to be one, is saying goodbye to the 13th apostle, a gentleman named Rufus. During this final exchange, before he returns to heaven, Rufus suggests that Bethany name her son after him. She scoffs, but the idea is implanted. Now let's assume that Bethany Sloan, the last scion, names her son, the new last scion in the bloodline, Rufus, after taking his suggestion to heart. Does anyone know anyone from the future that is charged with saving humanity as we know it that is named Rufus? How about Rufus from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? That's right, Rufus from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is the last scion, sent back in time by God to save Earth by teaming up with an unlikely band of teenage heroes and historical figures. This is why I consider Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure a part of the View Askew-niverse. George Carlin also happens to be in both movies, but I'm not sure if I can come up with a link between those two. And in case someone mentions that Rufus was sent back in time from the year 26XX or something, keep in mind it could still be him. Time travel, you know? Or he could just be a part of Rufus as the last Scion bloodline that goes all the way into the extreme future. Back to the future. The Doc is ready to kill himself along with Marty in that parking lot during the first time travel scene. Not only has he never tested the time machine, but he claims that many of his inventions have been failures. So during the moment when he's about to find out if his life's work was a huge success or a complete waste, he not only drives the DeLorean towards himself, but also grabs onto Marty when he tries to run away. If that first time travel test was a failure, they both would have been killed, which is exactly what Doc wanted had the experiment been a failure. You know, when you lay it out like that, it does make sense, but I always prefer to think of Doc as more crazy than sad. In My Neighbor Totoro, Totoro is the god of death. Here are my points. 1. It's saying that Totoro is in fact a messenger of death, and whoever sees him will soon die. The hospital that the sister's mother was in was based on a real hospital for terminally ill patients. Number 2, later in the story, the villagers find a slipper in a pond, which is in fact May's. At this point, she's already drowned in the pond. Satsuki lied that the slipper wasn't May's out of denial. From this scene forward, the sisters appear to have no shadow. Number 3, Satsuki pleaded to Totoro and the cat bus to take her to where May is. While on the cat bus, she says, "Nobody can see us." This scene is Satsuki leading herself to the land of the dead by taking the cat bus. Number 4, at the hospital, the mother says, "I think I feel May and Satsuki smiling there in that tree." Why don't the sisters go and see their mom if they're already there? Why do they just leave the corn there instead? It's said that the sisters were dead at that point, and the Japanese pronunciation of corn is similar to kill child. Number 5, the final scenes seem to be a happy epilogue, but they in fact happened before the major events of the movie. And finally, the movie was set in a place in Japan where there was a case of a murdering of 2 sisters which happened in the 1960s. This event took place on May 1st, while the sisters' names are Satsuki, May in Japanese, and May in English. In the real-life case, the younger sister was missing first, and the older sister was seen to be looking for her frantically. The next day, the younger sister's body was found in the forest. The older sister was in such a state of shock and kept rambling ambiguous words about seeing a cat monster or a great big raccoon monster to the police. The sisters were in fact from a single-parent family as well. The mother died of illness. An alternate theory I hear a lot is that there are no children. They can't have kids because of the wife's illness, and the father in his loneliness is writing in his diary about the kids he wished he had. He's often seen writing throughout the movie. In Inception, Leonardo DiCaprio's character is in the real world in the ending scene. He talks about how totems only work for specific people. The top was his wife's totem. It wouldn't work for him. His totem is his wedding ring. In the dream world, his wife is alive, and he's still married to her. Therefore, he wears his wedding ring. In all the scenes in the real world, his wife is dead, and he's no longer married. Because of this, he doesn't wear his ring. In the last scene, he isn't wearing his ring. Time to rewatch Inception and pay far too close attention to Leo's left hand. There's a theory in Ferris Bueller's Day Off that Cameron invented Ferris and he's living out what Cameron wishes he could be. Makes the movie mind-blowing. In Kill Bill, the bride doesn't kill Bill. First, you have to put her rampage in chronological order. She wakes up in the hospital, kills Buck, flies to Japan, kills everyone in the tea house, then comes back to the States to kill Vernita Green. We know this because O-Ren's name is already crossed off the list when she parks outside Vernita's house. In the process of killing Green, she accidentally does so in front of her young daughter. Her immediate reaction is shame. She tries to hide the knife behind her leg. From that point on, she doesn't kill anyone else. Bud dies from a snake bite. Daryl Hannah's character has her eye plucked out but is still alive. Then we get to Bill. They tell the story of the 5-point palm fist of death technique. but in the training sequences, it's never shown that she learns it. We're specifically told that Pai Mei never taught it to anyone. The other part that's suspicious is the play acting. When Beatrix first runs into the house, there's a play scene with her daughter. They pretend to shoot her and she pretends to be dead. This is what Bill does. At the end of the film, Beatrix is curled up on a bathroom floor crying, "Thank you, thank you." Who is she thanking? Bill, for letting her go. It was the only way for either of them to exit the situation gracefully. During the end credits, each of the people on the list who died gets a line through their name. Daryl Hannah is marked with a question mark because she was left alive. But Bill? Bill's name isn't marked at all, because they never killed Bill in Kill Bill. In The Matrix, people aren't used as an energy source. That's physically impossible, as it would take more energy to keep people alive than you'd get out of them. It's just the misinformation humans have. The machines were built to care for humans, and they're still going about that task. The machines think they're giving humans a better and more peaceful life. When people escape and try to free themselves, they're actually being let into another level of the Matrix. The machines realize some people need to strive and think that they're important, so they construct a false reality in which they can do so. The Sopranos. The guy in the members-only jacket walked out of the bathroom and killed Tony in front of Carmela and Anthony. It's the reason why the screen cuts to black. In a previous episode, Bobby asks him what he thinks death is like, and Tony says, "I bet it just cuts to black." The symbolism was pretty much hitting you over the head. How the family was posed like the Last Supper, how Tony was eating an orange earlier, how the episode where Tony was shot earlier was titled Members Only, how we kept hearing bells all through the episode. He definitely got whacked, and like he said, he never heard it coming. In the first Alien film, I always thought that the Weyland-Yutani Corporation already knew about the aliens and were looking for them. Not really so much mind-blowing, but I think it makes the film more sinister and creepy. I really love the theory that in Inspector Gadget, the inspector we know is actually the second inspector, built as a completely robotic replacement after the first was lost in action. He was loaded with his old memories, and nobody would have been the wiser, except that the original Inspector Gadget didn't actually die. Upon returning from whatever disaster caused his bosses to give up on him as KIA, and now horribly disfigured, he discovers his replacement is living his life, even with his dog and raising his niece. The original inspector snaps and vows to devote the rest of his life to the destruction of the ungodly replacement. He disavows everything he once knew and loved, even going so far as to take a new name, Dr. Claw. After watching and reading Fight Club about 100 times, I'm fully aware that Marla Singer is also a figment of the main character's imagination. She's the living embodiment of everything he originally hates about himself, and by the end of the movie, he's able to live with it, as well as absorb what he needed out of Tyler. If you watch it in this context, you'll see clear hints to this. The meetings stop working when the things he's running from follow him there, being Marla. He's screwing her as Tyler, the idealized version of himself, but as a half-disgust, half-envy thing going on as Jack. Those who went to a private school, what was the best rich kid meltdown you witnessed? I know a guy who didn't get into a college he really wanted to go to. Instead of accepting it, his parents spent millions to pay for a wing of a new building to be built. And after that, the college accepted him. He still had to pay full tuition after that too, $60K per year. My mom works at a prep school that I went to. Important to this story is the snowstorm that had been forecasted all week. As I'm putting together my bag of ski stuff in her office, her richest student showed up at the door. This kid is a billionaire, with a B, also sobbing his eyes out, like my leg is broken or my dog had just died crying. The problem was his dad's helicopter was grounded in New York City and not allowed to make the flight to their private jet in Teterboro, New Jersey. Instead, his dad would have to rent a limo to take him to a hotel in the area. This was delaying his trip to Belize or Cancun, and meant that he wouldn't get to start getting wasted for another 3 hours or so. And he was just so stressed. I was going to a normal public high school at the time. There was this girl in a youth group I was in who put everyone else down. She would go on and on about how much her parents loved her and how they loved her so much that she got to go to a fancy private school. She would really rub it in, too. Not having a good day, grades not so good, sick day. Well,
If only your parents loved you enough to send you to a private school like mine do.
It was annoying and hurtful to everyone. Well, one day I'm walking down the hall to my next class and I see the principal introducing a new student to the teacher. It was none other than this girl. Her folks must have gotten sick of her attitude and decided they needed to put her back into public school for an attitude adjustment. It sounds like this girl needed to be humbled a little. This was probably the right decision parentally. A bit of backstory, Sao Paulo has really crappy traffic, and rush hour is just miserable. Hours to go a few miles. So this girl who used to be nicer when she was younger became a total witch in high school. One day, her driver picked her up in the wrong car. It wasn't the Mercedes-Benz S-Class, but a mere normal car. She completely ignored him, refused to acknowledge he was there or waiting for her to get in the car. So that poor guy had to drive back to her house without her in the crappiest traffic imaginable to get the Benz. Drive back in the crappiest traffic imaginable to pick up a spoiled brat who started yelling at him for being incredibly late. I'm 100% sure he didn't drive the Benz in the first place because her dad forbade the driver from taking it. Ugh, God, I really do feel bad for that guy. I can't imagine having to put up with a child like that. I went to a boarding school in the late 90s, and I remember a girl in my Spanish class trying, unsuccessfully but at great length, to argue her way out of a tardy, because
Daddy's secretary forgot to call and wake me up this morning.
Do private colleges count? If so, there was a rich girl from LA who went to my college and demanded a private apartment in one of the dorm buildings because she didn't want roommates. Shortly after, she decided she didn't want to stay in the dorms at all and had her parents rent her a house that was $7,500 a month. This was in San Francisco, so I'm pretty sure most of you can imagine how expensive things can be. I went to an expensive private school on a scholarship and was friends with this girl Samantha, whose mom had security cameras in every room of the house and would constantly spy on her. Also had monitoring programs on the computer, the whole 9 yards. My parents mentioned this to me once, and being a stupid kid, I told Samantha. The mom flipped her lid. I'm talking calling my parents several times a day to berate them, to the point where they had to block her number. I was never allowed over to her house again. Samantha and her friends bullied me relentlessly for the rest of the year. It was pretty traumatic, honestly. I didn't understand what was going on, because I thought I was doing the right thing by telling her. This one doesn't feel fair to our original poster. They were just trying to give you a heads up that you're being spied on. For all of that to blow back in your face like that kind of leaves you not wanting to help people again in the future. I went to boarding school for 2 years. I was on a scholarship and most of the other girls were trust fund babies. They'd go skiing in Europe. Every week, they'd go on shopping sprees at the mall and make room in their closets by throwing out brand new, still with tags outfits. I didn't have money to go shopping, but I loved those days because I could pick through the new clothes in the trash cans and find beautiful things for me and my sister. One day, one of the snottier rich girls found me looking through the garbage and said some horrible things about how I was a trash picker, poor, and other stuff I've blocked out. I hid from class for 2 days because I was so embarrassed. A few months later, I was in the study hall late at night. Going back through the hallways to my room, I heard her sobbing in the hall. I almost walked right by, but I felt really bad for her. I stopped to ask her what was wrong, and she blurted out that her parents were divorcing. Then she realized who I was and started getting all rude. I gave her some Kleenex from my bag and told her I was sorry that was happening to her. Then I walked away. She wasn't super nice to me ever, but I think she got a little bit nicer after that, especially when her buddies weren't around. Honestly, it sounds like they're the stupid ones. You were getting brand new clothes for free. Let them call you all the names you want. You're getting high-end stuff for free? I'm not going to complain. I went to an all-women's private college. My second-year roommate was a disaster. Screamed on the phone as loud as possible with her parents if they didn't send her $5,000 a week. She wanted a new snowboard and had spent her $5,000 on going out and God knows what. She had a total meltdown in the hallway of the dorm, screaming that her parents didn't really care about her. I can't impress upon you how loud she was screaming. I was like, if I could get $50 a month, I was thrilled. But my parents never sent me money ever. How are you blowing through $5,000 a week? And even with that incredibly generous allowance, you still call and ask for more money instead of waiting until next week? Not exactly a meltdown, but a behavior issue. This kid was the senator's son, and in my history class behind me, he always acted entitled, and the teacher even praised his father like he was God. We get our test grades back, and he happens to see that I got a really good grade. For some reason, as we were passing our tests up the row for the teacher to recollect, he says, "Pick these up by yourself, nerd," and throws them all across the floor in front of me. This was in high school. I hadn't witnessed such a cheap way of bullying since elementary school. Ugh, this kid really just sounds like he plays up to all the stereotypes. My mom was an English teacher at a private school that I also went to, but her stories always seemed to be more intense than mine. Once, she was teaching a particularly badly behaved class, trying to get them to keep quiet and do the assigned work. This one stubborn kid decided that the best response was to say, "Why should I have to listen to you? My parents pay your salary." She flipped her lid, and that kid barely spoke for the rest of the year. This isn't from me, but my mom, who was a teacher at a private school. Just prepare yourself. So for this kid's 18th birthday, he gets this sweet red Porsche, which he drives to school. He doesn't need it to drive to school because he lives literally a 30-second walk away on the estate where the houses start at about £3 million each. But he does it anyway because he's a tool. Because this beautiful car must not be forced to mingle with the commoner cars of the other 6th form students, he's given permission to park it in the staff car park, which is still commoner cars but on a secured lot. Around a week later, he's showing off to his friends by fooling around in his car in the staff car park, and slams the passenger side of his car into the back of a staff car. The staff car is an old Jeep from the 90s, so it's not the least bit disturbed or dented from having a sports car wrapped around it. No one was in the passenger side, and the driver was fine, but the car itself looked like a really expensive boomerang. Of course, the kid starts screaming and crying and complaining, threatening all sorts of legal action. My mom was his head of year at the time, so he comes running to her demanding something be done. But she does everything but outright laugh in his face and tells him he's on his own. The next day, my mom comes into work and some very irate and powerful parents are waiting in her office, demanding to know why the school wasn't doing anything about the fact a staff member had crashed into their son's car, and threatening to press criminal charges if the school didn't pay up. The kid's there with a massive grin on his face, but this isn't my mother's first rodeo. Oh no, she's prepared. Oh? Well, that's not what the staff member said happened. Let's review the CCTV, shall we? Obviously, the kid is now bricking it, and the parents agree to watch, knowing they'll be vindicated. Of course, it shows the kid donutting around in his car before smashing into the Jeep. The parents slowly turn to the kid. The kid starts ranting and raving. Honest to God, full breakdown. My mom was worried an ambulance would have to be called to commit this child. Eventually, the parents agreed to pay for any damages to the staff's car. The kid got a new car, but it was something like a third-hand Ford Ka, and he wasn't allowed to drive it to school anymore. It got even better when the next year, his brother came into the 6th form and got a sweet ride, and told my mom that that original jerk had been banned from driving it, as well as the parents' new cars, after he also crashed his Ka. This is a perfect example of why you don't get your kids this age stuff that's very expensive. At the end of the day, they just end up ruining it. I'm sorry, you can't be trusted. We know you want to show off to your friends, but you can do that in a Ford. You don't need to do it in an expensive Porsche. I briefly attended a private school for about 3 years. A girl that had been going there since kindergarten received a low grade on a Spanish test and went off on the teacher about it. She got her parents involved in everything and ended up transferring schools because the teacher wouldn't adjust her grade. Is that really worth all the trouble involved? Like, spend an extra night studying Spanish. You'll be fine. I went to a normal high school, but I remember there was a rich girl that lost it one day because one of her nails broke on her manicured hand, and she called her mom to come get her so she could get it fixed immediately. The school was okay with it because they didn't want to hear her whining about it anymore. It wasn't a private school, rather a public school in a very wealthy town. We really did have the best of everything at my school. My family's fairly wealthy. Some of the kids I grew up with, though, were heirs to vast fortunes. Insurance, DuPont, sports empires, etc. I was sitting in the lobby at my high school. This girl had just gotten the ultra-exclusive Dolce & Gabbana Motorola Razr. She was going on and on about how exclusive it was. This other girl rounds the corner and was like, "Oh my god, I just got the same phone." The first girl looked like she was gonna choke her out. She got the girl to hand her phone and said, "Poor girls like you don't deserve fashion accessories like this," and snapped her phone in half. The other girl took it unbelievably well. I actually became friends with her after that. Turns out that she was not poor at all. Her mother was one of the heirs to the Sears fortune, and her father was a bigwig at Motorola. The best part is that she got her father to give her 50 of these stupid gold Dolce & Gabbana phones, and handed them out a few days later to a bunch of kids at school. I still have mine somewhere in the box. I appreciated the gift, but never used it. Shout out to the girl who single-handedly ripped the exclusivity of this phone out of this school. My sister cried as she got a laptop for Christmas. For the previous year, she wanted a laptop, but for this, she only wanted clothes. It was made better when my mom opened a "I love my rotten, ungrateful children" fridge magnet after my sister went upstairs. Currently in a very wealthy private school in Manhattan. Many are wealthy, and many aren't who are on financial aid, but culture in the school is to be pretty humble about wealth. A girl that actually just moved here was telling me about her $50 million trust fund and her daddy's private plane. She picks up her phone and I see a text from her mom. I look over and see what appears to be a long apology from her mom about something. I ask her what she's apologizing for. The girl explains that she went ape on her parents the night earlier for making her fly first-class commercial, but she was the one receiving the apology. I don't think I managed to stifle my laughing. Honestly, this is not funny. This girl's gonna grow up to be a horrible person. I used to work at a private alternative school for at-risk youth in the Northeast. Parents sent their kids there from all over the world and paid about $80K a year for their entitled kids to go there. Biggest meltdown I ever saw was from a kid who lived in my dorm. We had a status system so those on the lowest status couldn't have their personal electronics from the time they turned them in the previous night until about 6 p.m. the next day. This kid notoriously skipped class to play WoW all day long and simply refused to turn his electronics into me. His advisor finally convinced him that turning in his electronics was a better idea than not doing it, so he turned them into me. The kid came to me asking for his electronics a few hours too early, and I said no. Since this kid was 18, he threatened to drop out and literally walk home. This was in the middle of nowhere, and this kid lived about an hour or two away. I stood my ground and still said no, so he ran downstairs to his room to pack his things. I called the admin on duty, and he came and determined it was a situation for the headmaster to get involved. He also came, and the kid threw enough of a hissy fit that they both came to me asking for the electronics. I handed them over, and the kid calmed down, but it didn't end there. He decided he needed revenge. So one night, he and another student decided that they would spray my car with a fire extinguisher. The only reason I know it was him was because my advisee managed to get a video of it. The guy who was the head of the dorm next to mine was a volunteer firefighter, so he said to me the next morning, "Hey man, looks like your car got sprayed with a fire extinguisher." I didn't think anything of it, but he continued with, "That stuff will melt the paint off your car and etch your windows. You need to go wash it now." So I booked it to the nearest car wash and spent about $100 to save my paint. Luckily, the school reimbursed me and charged the family of the two kids for the cost of the wash. We're in a small town with one major manufacturing chain which pretty much owned everything in town. It recently moved its headquarters out of state and had an IPO. Anyway, the owning family, we'll call them Schmidt, had a Stanford-bound son who was attending the same driver's ed class as my sister, who had no idea who he was. Anyway, my sister, who entertains herself by persistently slightly annoying or flirting with random people, happened to make super rich Stanford-bound teen the object of her flirting. She flicked a tiny piece of paper at him, played with his hair a bit, and he says, "I'm Adam Schmidt," as if to say, "How dare you?" My sister had no idea that was supposed to mean something and just smilingly said, "Hi," then went back to flicking tiny paper balls at him. "I'm Adam Schmidt," he repeated. My sister was still undeterred. This went on for a while when he finally shouted in class, "I'm Adam Schmidt. Don't you know who my father is?" We looked him up after. Turns out he was a pretty big deal, and that phrase probably would have played really well with lots of people in our town. But to us? I had a rough time in public elementary school, so I went to a private Catholic school for middle school. I'm Jewish, but they let me attend, no doubt for the tuition, and just had me go to the computer lab when we did religion class or went to mass. One girl there hated me, just straight up would make fun of me because I was poor. My family was solidly middle class, so no. Or because my mom was an Eastern European immigrant and speaks with a thick accent. Or because I was a Jew. First time I had anti-Semitic crap hurled at me was from this little witch. Because I didn't have to sit through mass and got to play Oregon Trail instead. So my bat mitzvah comes around and my teacher decided to use it as a learning moment for the class. I explained what it was, that I get to have a big party and the whole thing. Of course a bunch of 12 and 13-year-olds are going to be into it. Especially since I was the only Jew any of them were actually close with. The attention was off her, and she was getting more and more annoyed with it all. The Monday after my party, when everyone was talking about it, she threw a huge fit in the parking lot after school when her mom picked her up, because she wouldn't let her have a bat mitzvah. Apparently she had asked, and her mother had said, "We're not Jewish and you're having a sweet 16 in a few years, so no." She lost it and had a meltdown because she couldn't have a party celebrating a ritual of a religion she wasn't a part of and wouldn't be partaking in, when she had done nothing but talk crap about me for being in that religion for the last few months. I still remember my mother picking me up that day, listening to her bray in the parking lot. One of my good friends got a brand new Audi R8 for his 16th birthday. It matched his dad's. He got all peeved and huffy because it wasn't the right V10 or something like that. Still good friends with him though. We go to LA some weekends. His treat, of course. I didn't go to a massively pricey private school. Most of the kids there were from middle-class families who spent most of their money sending their kid to my school, because the other options were just so bad. But there were exceptions. We had 5 math sets and I was in the top 1. One day, one of the rich kids decides it would be funny to blow his nose in a 20-pound note and tosses it in a bin. A teacher sees this and flips out. He says if the kid ever does anything in that vein again, he'll move him to the bottom set. Now, about 3 weeks passed and the moron does it again. The teacher wasn't bluffing and kicks him down 4 classes. Being in set 5 compared to 1 was like walking into a room filled with Peter Griffins. After 1 class, the kid comes back blubbering to the teacher, just as we were all leaving to beg to get back into the class. It was like chicken soup for my middle-class soul. I was happy for weeks. This is just literally a complete disregard for money. Isn't it also illegal in some places to throw away or destroy currency? I knew a kid back in 4th grade. He was a little demon of a tyke, real jerk to everyone and would lord himself over you in just about any conceivable way possible to get you to do his bidding. One day, some girl stood up to him and refused to do something. I forget what, it's been years. And he started yelling and screaming about how his big shot lawyer daddy was gonna sue her family for everything her family had. Come to find out, kid's been trying this with other kids and they all come to her defense. He turned bright red, like cherry red, and started screaming about how this whole school wanted to bring him down, and that he deserved everything that we all had. Really going to town on being an entitled brat. Ultimately, we found out that she'd forgotten to bring him his pencil he'd lent her after a class, and that's what started all the chaos. She forgot a pencil. Apparently, that was one expensive or one special pencil, cause he never shut up about it the rest of the semester, and would constantly harass and bully this poor girl over it. Kid wound up getting pulled out of school cause the bullying was so bad, and this little brat went around for the next year saying that he had her removed from the school, and his daddy was the one who had her parents remove her, saying she was worthless. He was expelled 2 years later from the same school. I wasn't there anymore, but apparently he'd brought a gun to school to try and show off how tough he really was. This one kid on his 16th birthday received a beautiful new Rolex. It was gold with a blue ring. Stunning watch. Apparently, this wasn't the color he was looking for, so he threw it over the school fence into the adjacent river. What followed can only be described as throwing a foot-long steak sub into a nest of hungry African kids. About 12 younger kids scrambled to retrieve this watch. From what I remember, his parents bought him a new watch. The right color this time, of course. Don't the parents of these children realize they're not doing them any kind of favors here? You're raising your kid to be a horrible person. Redditors who rage quit a job without thinking, what was the last straw? I worked as a painter for a franchisee of a student painting company, and he kept telling me that he would pay me next week. This went on for about 6 weeks, and the final straw was when I had finished several large projects that would give him ample money to pay me, but he decided to hire on another person instead of paying me for all the work I had already done, like $1,300 worth of work. Then he tried negotiating down what he thought he should be paying me, despite already agreeing in writing what I would be getting paid right from the get-go. I was so mad that I didn't give him notice or even show up for the next day of work, because I had bills to pay and needed to make as much money as possible during the summer. I wrote him off as a lost cause and took him to small claims court for what he owed me and eventually got my money through the court. It was still a real pain though, and as far as I know, he's still working there full time. How's your boss going to try and negotiate your pay after there's already been a signed contract? I've never heard of that before. After working 37 years, I requested a leave from work to care for my partner who was dying of cancer. I had 8 weeks of paid time off and was denied the request, so I quit to care for him in his last month of life. That's just heartless. How are you not going to give someone that time off? If ever there was a reason to give them time off, that is the time. And after 37 years of working there too. It's just insulting. I was working at a call center. My shift started at 10, and I badged into the building at about 9:55 and logged on. But the decrepit PC I was using took so long to boot up that when I finally logged in, I was 15 seconds late. I told my supervisor, and he said that there's nothing he can do. And since I was late, I was put on probation and wouldn't be eligible for a raise for another month, and that I should arrive 15 minutes early so that situation won't happen again. I handed him my headset, walked out, and have never worked in a call center since. I needed a summer job while I was in high school, so I applied at a local grocery store to bag, stock, and clean. My first day there was some sort of confusion as to what I was supposed to do, or to whom I was to report. I was sent to the front counter, where the customer service manager gave me a till and told me to open a register. Mind you, I'd had zero training on a register. I didn't even know how to put the till in. I told the lady this and was told to go do my job. Within about 2 minutes at the register, there was a line several deep, and I'm just standing there with the till in my hands. The customer service lady comes storming over asking why I had such a line, and I tried again to explain to her that I was supposed to be the stalker or whatever, and that I knew nothing about operating a register. She called me stupid in front of the customers, so I handed her the till and told her to screw off. I walked down the street in my uniform and got a job at another grocery store. It's the person's first day on the job and you've given them no training. How are you going to turn around and call them stupid? You're the stupid one for just expecting them to have this knowledge. I rage quit, or more like quietly abandoned a job in high school at a big warehouse clothing shop because I was hired to work stock items and the manager decided to put me behind the register and otherwise on the floor. I stocked items for about a month before this suddenly happened. What used to be unpacking boxes and putting stuff on shelves became walking around, constantly picking up clothes from the floor, and one day the register. It was a busy day and our recently hired employees were like 14. So they weren't legally able to operate the register, so the manager decided to put me on. I was 16. I was shown how to do a basic transaction exactly one time, and then left with a long line of customers. I did not know what I was doing, and did maybe 20 transactions on people's credit cards that I'm sure were wrong. When lunch break came, I went to see a buddy that worked in a Blockbuster in the same mall. I had decided to never come back, but then I realized I left my jacket in the break room. I had to come back after a 3-hour lunch and pretend that I just lost track of time in order to get access to the break room. Then I quietly snuck out again. I went through several interviews and started a new gig. I'd be providing call center support for Windows and maybe some Apple support. Nothing I couldn't handle. I am, after all, IT support. Heck, I even cleaned the mouse while I was trying to take the technical test. I get a start date and am told it'd be 2 weeks of training. No big deal, I can do 2 weeks of training. I show up on day 1 of training and it's support for Whirlpool washing machines and dryers. Hold the phone. What? That's right, classic bait and switch. I got up, walked over to my hiring manager and said, I quit. You hired me for Windows support, not washing machines and dryers, and walked out. 2 weeks later, I get a call. Hi, this is X, your manager. I'm calling to find out why you haven't come to work in 2 weeks. I guess you didn't get that memo. I quit on day 1 because your company lied to me. Got an $80 paycheck. About 7 years later, I got a letter in the mail that a class action lawsuit had been filed against the company for labor law violations. 2 months after that, I got an 8-cent check in the mail, which just made me laugh. I'm surprised that you even got a paycheck. I actually did this like 2 months ago for the first time. I'm a bartender and I was working in some crappy Mexican restaurant downtown. The tips were crap because the food was crap, so we were barely ever busy. So already I'm living in New York City making barely $400 a week, when I'm used to making more than double that. At this point, I've been there 2 months and I hate it more and more every day. Around this time, my mother gets really bad pneumonia, and due to complications, it degraded her heart. So she has to have open heart surgery to repair a valve. It's a risky procedure and my mother is touching 65. Now, let me state that staff turnover was incredibly high, because in addition to us making horrible money, the manager was a complete and utter moron. Most staff left after a month. So my mom gives me a date for her surgery. I go to my manager and give her a basic breakdown of the situation and tell her I need 4 days off from X to Y so I can be with my family. She says no problem. But just to play it safe, I send emails and texts to her confirming that I indeed do have these days off. She agrees. I think, cool, no problem. Oh boy, was I wrong. 3 days before the surgery, the schedule for the week comes out, and I'm scheduled through the entire week. I immediately go to my manager and ask what the heck is going on, because I'm not wasting away behind this moldy rat-infested bar in the West Village while my mom has surgery. No lies, this woman has the nerve to say I didn't request it off at all. When I show her my paper trail stating that yes, I did put in a request, she says, what difference does it make if you're there? The surgery is going to have the same outcome whether you're there or not, and starts rattling off about how I need to be a team player and I'm messing up her schedule by requesting time off and yada yada yada. Her voice fades off and I literally see red. I say nothing and go back to work. This is at 5 p.m. Happy hour and our rush starts at 8. I'm the only bartender on today. Fast forward to 8:30. My bar is slammed. I have a bunch of drink tickets from the servers and it's a mess. Total chaos. My manager comes behind the bar and instead of offering any assistance, she tells me not to bring any home drama to work. I just stare at her in disbelief for a moment, truly stunned that such a tone-deaf moron could possibly be in charge of anything. I laughed in her stupid face and walked right out of the door and went to go see my mom. P.S. My mom made a full recovery. I was 21 working at UPS, was a truck loader the first year, became the fastest worker in the warehouse just because I like working quickly. Only wanted to become a supervisor because my manager was really easy to work with and always wanted to help with solutions to problems. Once they promoted me to supervisor, they transferred my manager to a different warehouse and didn't say why. Worked as a supervisor for a year, and once peak season arrived, mid-November, early January, things were getting crazy, and my manager was just a yes man to his boss. Never helped solve issues, just said figure it out or get it done. Well, in November, my best friend and I had won a World Series of Beer Pong satellite tourney to get a free entry and stay at the Flamingo in Vegas for the tournament worth $600. The tournament was from January 1st to 5th. Well, peak season is nearly impossible to get time off, and I looked at this tournament as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with my best friend. Things were just getting so crazy, and they weren't approving any vacation requests. I wasn't getting assistance from my boss with the workload, so I just said screw it, I'm out. Come to find out, my manager, his boss, and 4 other managers got fired for changing time cards to make their production numbers look better. Which I found out is why they shipped my cool manager away, because he wouldn't participate in the dirty deeds. My best friend and I placed 46th out of 500 teams. It's one of the best memories I have to this day. No regrets. I used to work as a housekeeper at a really shady hotel. Wasn't the best job in the world, but the pay actually wasn't that bad. The owner and his wife were horrible to everyone, especially the housekeepers. I eventually worked my way to being the head housekeeper, but they kept referring to me as a maid. I don't know why that bothered me so much, but it did. Anyway, the rodeo was in town and we were really busy. I had every single room to clean, and none of my other housekeepers were showing up for work. So I asked my boss where they were, and he said he gave them the day off. They're young and have stuff to do. They were all high schoolers and I was 19 at the time. It was summer, so he decided he wanted them to go out and have fun and leave the 65 rooms to me. I was already mad at that, but then it got worse. I get to about my 15th room and I'm already exhausted. I just want to get one more done so I can take a break. I knock on the door and there's no answer. So I let myself in to see a man standing naked in the doorway. I apologize and try to leave when he calls me back. He said he wanted me to clean the room. I told him I couldn't while he was still there, and certainly not while he was naked. He said I had to do it. He was a guest. I go to my boss and explain why I wasn't cleaning that room. He told me I had to do what the customer said. If he wanted to be naked and in the room while I cleaned, then that's what had to happen. I threw my cleaning rag at him, told him to screw off, and left the rest of the rooms to him. I worked as a stock boy in the back of Hollister. Clothing retail for those unaware. Never really had any interaction with customers, but was still forced to buy their clothes to wear to work. They had all these rules about hairstyles, fingernails, and facial hair. One night, I came in to start a shift at 2:30 a.m. to do a floor change, so middle of the night, and the shift would end around the time the store opened up. I had the slightest bit of stubble on my face, like a day and a half's worth of stubble. My manager at 4 a.m. told me she had a problem with my facial hair, and that when the mall opened up, I better go buy a razor and shave before anyone saw me like that, or she'd have to send me home for the night. I basically said, well, lucky for me, I was planning on quitting anyways. Good luck with the floor change, and walked out. Went and got a biscuit breakfast, went home and got in bed. I understand that there's rules and etiquette that you have to follow at any given job, but there also needs to be some leeway given by the managers in reasonable situations. I think this would qualify. The boss not doing payroll before leaving on a business trip and leaving it to the poor office manager to tell people they weren't going to get paid on time. I walked out of a staff meeting saying I'd be back when the paychecks arrived. By the time I got home, I was mad enough to call my ops manager back and quit. Why didn't the boss do payroll? The stated answer was printer toner cartridge at home was empty. Guess he'd never heard of writing checks with a pen. Yeah, my printer ink is low, so y'all don't get paid. Okay, bye. That's such a jerk move. Earlier in my career in residential HVAC, I thought it'd be a good idea to branch out a little, to add some tools to my tool bag, so to speak. So I took a position as a lead installer at a smaller company. It wasn't particularly bad, it just wasn't in my wheelhouse, and I grew to dislike installing and tried to shift back over to the service department. My manager knew I wanted to transfer, but wouldn't let me despite my prior experience, and instead hired another tech. Now, part of the reason I didn't want to do install anymore was because of the salesmen. They were idiots. The concept of a tape measure was completely lost on them, and there were times they'd overpromise at the expense of me and my assistant. One day in particular, the residential salesman had us install the wrong type of evaporator coil, that's the thing that makes cold happen, in an attic without taking any proper measurements beforehand. It didn't fit between the joists, and when I asked for someone to come help, I was told to use your imagination. We managed to get it done, sort of, but at 5:30 it literally fell apart. I was apologetic, called the salesman, and unloaded on him. We hacked it together just enough and we left. The next day at the shop, the salesman tried talking to me and I quit on the spot. He said that we had a meeting with a Lennox rep and to reconsider and please just think about it. He must have thought I'd agreed because when I went to turn in my timesheet in the meeting room, he began to introduce me as the lead installer and service tech when it's slow. So I look at him and reply, "Psh, I was," and walked out. I feel like this kind of thing probably happens a lot in this kind of industry, where the salesman is just trying to make a sale and they'll kick up the price as much as they possibly can because they're getting a commission off it, not really thinking or caring whether or not the installer can actually do the job. My first job at aircraft maintenance was for a grumpy old dirtbag. I was a completely green apprentice fresh out of school, and the old guy had no understanding of what his obligations were when taking on an apprentice, and expected me to just know everything already. He'd send me to do jobs unsupervised, wouldn't provide any instruction or guidance, then get upset if I messed something up. He chewed me out for taking too long to do stuff. He'd occasionally call me into his office and quiz me on random crap, then belittle me for not having all the answers, telling me he was going to phone up his buddies at the college and tell them how disappointed he was with the quality of their graduates. The guy was a total hypocrite too. He didn't have current manuals for any of the aircraft, didn't properly track parts and hardware, he literally had a room full of spare parts with no history, and took all kinds of shortcuts. One time during a windscreen replacement, rather than measuring out the hardener for a sealant, he eyeballed it. It was supposed to set up in a couple hours, but it hadn't hardened after 3 days, so he made me paint over it. We were supposed to cut open and inspect every oil filter we replaced, looking for metal that would indicate a failing engine. He'd store all the old oil filters on a giant workbench without labeling them, and after a year or two, go inspect them all at once. If any had metal, there was no way of knowing which aircraft it came from. He got away with being bad at his job because the Transport Canada inspector responsible for audits in that area was a friend of his. And he'd boast about how audits consisted of them talking over donuts in the break room for 3 days. Anyway, it was the last day of my probation, and he called me into his office to tell me he had a very difficult decision about whether to keep me on. I told him I'd make it easy for him and quit on the spot. As a former aircraft maintenance mechanic, this literally made me wince. I honestly didn't think in this day and age, with the amount of regulation and monitoring, places like that could still exist. I hope that dude gets what he deserves, cause he'll kill people. I worked on a farm throughout high school for a very wealthy couple. The husband was a successful commercial real estate agent, and the wife trained dogs to do hunt and field tests. I primarily worked for the wife, assisting in training the dogs, but as it was a farm, I did various things for the husband as well. The husband was a raging alcoholic who would get angry if you didn't share a drink with him when offered. When his wife was out of town participating in competitions with the dogs, I would have to drive over to the farm multiple times a day to feed the horses, clean out their stalls, etc. And I would often run into him, but I tried to avoid it when possible, because he made me uncomfortable. Anyway, I was like 17 and it was summer, so I accidentally slept through my 6 a.m. alarms one morning, and I didn't get to the farm until around 8 to feed the horses and clean out their stalls. Not like it mattered, the horses can't tell time. The husband was there and had already been drinking, as I could smell it on him. And he started laying into me about being so late. He told me I was a poor white trash piece of garbage, and if my parents let me oversleep for my job, then they're even worse white trash pieces of garbage, and I won't ever amount to anything just like them, yada yada yada. I told him he could rake up the horse poop himself, and that I quit. And as I was leaving, he was yelling at the top of his lungs that he would find me and kill me. I never went back. When I was in between jobs, I applied to work a construction job that needed harness-trained people. I was just coming off working as a solar installer, so I figured I'd give it a shot. First day on the job, they take me up to the top of their scaffolding section to clamp down beams. No biggie. I ask where their walkboards or scaffolding walks are for this floor, because all the other floors have walkways, whereas this one is just 1-inch beam, 3-foot gap, 1-inch beam all the way across, 100+ feet in the air. They tell me they don't have any. Okay, I guess I'll deal. After a few hours of grueling work, I depleted my gallon jug of water and was getting dizzy. I called down to the elevator operator to bring me down. Without missing a beat, he shouts, "Climb!" and walks off to smoke a cigarette. I climbed down all 14 or so stories on angled beams with no harness, while bordering on heat exhaustion. I walked up to the foreman, told him he was going to kill someone and it wasn't going to be me. Then I left. I worked at Best Buy in the mid-thousands. I started as a cashier and eventually made my way to the customer service booth, which was something you had to earn. One day, it was a bit busier than usual, and I was in the booth with another girl who was a notoriously lazy person. The boss asked her to jump on a register to clear out a line, and she said no. So the boss asked me, and I also said no, because I was already given another task. The next day, they pulled me into the office and told me I was demoted because of it. I walked right to my locker, grabbed my stuff, and left. Turns out, the other girl was sleeping with the boss, and that's why she was allowed to say no, but I couldn't. Sleeping with the boss aside, shouldn't you get some kind of warning or talking to about this instead of just an immediate demotion for something like that? Also, you weren't able to do it because you were busy working on something else. Otherwise, you might have been willing to help out and jump in. Teachers of Reddit, what's the most delusional thing you've seen a parent do? I work in a daycare, and for 3 months, this one dad would come in and yell at us that his kid wasn't potty trained yet. The kicker of the entire thing was that his kid wasn't even 2. I used to teach children's art classes. One girl turned up and shyly said hi to me. Her mom got cross with her and sternly made her go back outside so that she could re-enter the room and make an impression. The girl came back and gave me a nice big fake smile and wave and loudly said hello. The mother also spent way too much time making sure I realized that they lived in a very rich suburb and went to a very elite private school. I just feel bad for the kid having to deal with a mom like that. I'm not a teacher, but I'm sure if the teacher in question was a Redditor, my story would be here. My primary school taught Chinese. My mom has very strong opinions towards Asians, so much so that she refused to let me participate in these lessons. The school said they weren't going to employ someone to sit in a classroom and supervise me while all the other students had the Chinese lesson. So my mom did it. Once a week throughout grades 1 to 7, all my classmates would go to another classroom for their lesson, while I would stay in my classroom with no one but my mom. Did she really not have anything better to do? There's no way my daughter plagiarized. She didn't copy and paste it. She printed it out and retyped every word. That's still, never mind. First day of my mom's kindergarten class in 90s Orange County, a parent says to my mom, "My child is going to Harvard. What are you going to do to get him there?" Those are some high expectations for a kindergarten teacher. The parent of a high school student who constantly disrespected me and acted up in class believed that if he sat in during my class, his daughter would behave. The father and daughter got into an argument during class and were both asked to leave because they were interrupting the lesson. Great, now there's 2 of them. Let their kids skip more than a third of the school days, never answered or returned a single call, nor showed up for a single parent conference, and then claimed that I should be fired for being a bad teacher when their kid failed. Another teacher I work with has a kid who refuses to come to class or participate unless her parents buy her something each week. The parent always gives in to the bribe, every week, and the kid still sometimes refuses to do anything anyway. My mom is a principal in a not very nice area and has to deal with some pretty rough parents. A couple of months ago, some girl beat the crap out of another girl in the cafeteria. When my mom brought her down to the office, she threatened to fight my mom. So my mom called her mom. Her mom then came in and also threatened to fight her. No fighting occurred. Police were called though. Gee, I wonder where she gets it. I was a para in a special ed classroom. We had one boy with autism who was 9 years old. His mom told me one day that it hurts him to poop in the toilet. She would let him poop in his pants. Then she would put the poop in the toilet and his underwear in a bucket of bleach water. He used the bathroom by himself no problem all the time at school. He was clearly not in pain pooping on the toilet. What? Why is this mom being so extra? I worked for a socialization program for children with special needs. I had a mother of a fantastic young boy with severe autism and no verbal skills full out argue publicly with my boss that he needed to be moved to a class with the highest functioning kids. She told us her baby had nothing wrong with him. He's a wonderful kid, but he couldn't handle that much stimuli. He clearly struggled to be able to communicate. I think a fair amount of parents whose children have special needs are really in denial and to the detriment of their children's development. We all get blamed for the student's bad grades. Kid had 30 missing assignments. Of course, it's the teacher's fault he's failing the class. Very annoying. Yeah, that's gotta be like the default, right? I'm sure you guys get that all the time. I used to be a high school teacher's assistant during the summer. These summer classes were usually taken by students who failed them the first time around. One mother comes up to me at the end of the semester demanding to know how her daughter had failed math a second time. I told her it was because she spent so much of her time socializing and texting on her phone during class, at which point the mom exploded saying that I was lying because her daughter didn't even have a phone, and that I was grading unfairly and that her daughter shouldn't be having such a hard time with math. Turns out the daughter had bought a cell phone off a friend and got a pay-as-you-go contract behind her mother's back after she got her phone taken away the first time she failed math. At a statewide convention for middle schoolers that included a talent show, basically a bunch of middle school kids from mostly rural areas doing magic tricks, singing, playing an instrument, signing a song in sign language, and stuff like that. The mother tells her daughter that there might be talent scouts there. The daughter freaks out and bombs her talent. Seriously? What talent scout hits up middle school talent shows? I feel like this would be like a mom from Toddlers and Tiaras or something. A boy took a picture of a special needs girl's butt because her jeans rode down a bit. He passed the picture around the school, which resulted in lots of bullying directed toward the girl. When the boy was suspended, his father appealed the suspension, blamed the school for targeting his child, and threatened to sue. This resulted in the best line I've ever heard from a school principal. "Fine. The moment I hear from your lawyer is the moment you'll be reading the charges I'll be filing on your son." Yeah, Dad, don't push it. Your son's getting off pretty light here considering. My mom is a special education teacher. She's seen numerous parents try to force their kids into special education classes just because they wanted the disability check that comes with it. It's absolutely disgusting. I was working with a class of gifted high school students taking a summer course. During a field trip, one of my students needed to go to a doctor's appointment and would be picked up early by her parents. The only way to contact the group on the field trip was my cell phone, so the parents got my personal number. In the week left in the summer course, I received 23 text messages and 15 calls asking why their 10th grade daughter had not called them back. What? Why do you have anything to do with that? Principal here had a kid who was gifted and who almost died at birth. Mom felt super guilty, and as a result, she wouldn't dare do or say anything to upset him. So the kid ran the show. The kid got other kids and teachers in trouble by lying, then would tell his mom some story and she would come sailing in to his defense. Even said things like her son would never lie. Anyway, the year in my school was a gong show. After that year, the kid convinced his mother that the whole school was full of bullies, mean teachers, and an incompetent principal. They withdrew him and put him in a private school. Good move. I caught a girl cheating by writing formulas on her hand. She told the dean and her mother that that was how she studied, and she'd forgotten to wash it off. Mom believed her and set up a conference with me to explain. The dean did not, and she got a Saturday school. Think Breakfast Club. Dance teacher here. I had a parent pull her 3-year-old daughter out of a dancing concert, which she had paid roughly $300 in performing costs and $250 in tuition, all because her child's class were cast as the mice from Cinderella and not as the mermaids from The Little Mermaid. The mouse costumes were beautiful pink and gray glitter tutus and were classed as the cutest performance of the night. After she heard the reviews, she tried to get us to stage the concert again so her daughter could perform. Talk about a world revolves around me concept. My mother was a lunch lady when I was in kindergarten, and there was a girl who was morbidly obese in my class. She couldn't walk from the classroom to the lunchroom without getting sick from the physical activity. My mom and some of the other lunch ladies started tweaking the menu when she got in line to have the healthier options out for her to eat. Her mother caught wind of this and started packing her lunch, always with cookies and Twinkies and soda. I don't know how as a parent you can allow your child to live like that, to encourage it. I'm not saying don't give your kids treats, but how do you let it get to that point? If it's kindergarten and this is already an issue, then yeah, there's a problem that you need to address. Mom, you're not helping anything. You're actively making the process worse and getting in the way of those who are trying to help and care about your child's health. I was a student, but dealt with a crazy parent. Mom of a classmate complained that I missed over 50% of the class and received an A, but their kid who only missed one day failed. She tried to get me suspended when she saw that her son wasn't going to be passed. I had to go to a parent-teacher conference consisting of my classmate, his mom, me, and the admins for 2 whole weeks during lunches to try and explain to this lady that I wasn't going to be failed. I teach elementary French, and as a treat at the end of the month, the kids get to watch a little bit of a movie in French. So I sent home a notice to parents to let them know this was the plan, and give them an idea of some of the shows I was thinking about. One of them was Beauty and the Beast. Shortly after I sent this notice home, one of the parents emailed me to tell me why they were fine with most of the choices, but didn't want their daughter watching Beauty and the Beast. There was no explanation for why. I've been told by the other teachers that this girl's parents are kind of bizarre, and have heard a couple of stories in the few months I've been there. They're a highly religious family, and don't want their children exposed to anything they deem inappropriate. What's inappropriate about Beauty and the Beast? Are you going to turn around and say that all the furniture moving around and having life is ungodlike or something? I don't understand your argument here. I saw a parent rip an evolution poster from the wall, claiming that it impacted her religious freedom. I had no idea evolution and religion are in a battle to the death. My first parent conference in 2005, the mom brings a large cardboard box full of hand lotion and a doctor's note for her student. The doctor's note states that the student is to use the restroom each class period as needed. The large cardboard box full of hand lotion is for the son's insatiable desire to take care of himself. 6 months into my first year teaching, this kid asks to use the restroom. I allow him, and while he's in the restroom, he scales a 10-foot cinder block wall into the ceiling tiles and tries to cross over to the women's restroom. He uses a pencil to poke holes into the ceiling tiles so he can peek into the women's restroom stalls. Eventually, his weight caused him to fall through the tiles and he impacts the support walls of 2 stalls. The end result? Broken clavicle and humerus, separated shoulder, torn ligaments in knee, and severe concussion. After the incident, the student was expelled from school and enrolled in outdoor programs. What kind of doctor gives your kid a note for that? I'm still in student teaching, but when I was in high school, students could rent a MacBook for the school year. You filled out a contract and weren't allowed to replace certain parts or install certain things. Naturally, one kid I was acquainted with who constantly bragged about getting around the rules got caught and was to have his school-issued laptop revoked for the rest of the school year, as well as be suspended for a short amount of time. His mom stormed in, made the assistant principal cry in her surrounded by windows office, and the kid showed up 2 days later with his laptop back. It wasn't a question if the kid could afford a laptop without the school's reduced rental price. He had numerous desktop computers and a personal laptop. Honestly, this story just makes me feel bad for the assistant principal. Some parents can just be the worst when it comes to their kid. One time, a kid got into a fight with another kid in the hallway. He got this kid on the ground and started kicking the crap out of him. As he was kicking, his sneaker flew off and got stuck in the ceiling tiles. As I'm leaving school for the day, he's standing with his mother in the front office, and she's screaming at the poor principal because her son only had 1 shoe. What, does she think the principal confiscated 1 shoe? A couple hired me to teach their 13-year-old overweight daughter to ride a bike, a deal to which she only agreed if they bought her a $450 bike. They did. During the lesson, she sat down and pouted and refused to do anything. I still got paid. Special education teacher here. A parent recently told me that they believe their son shouldn't be sped by middle school if I'm doing my job right. Their son is nonverbal and severely autistic. It just made me sad. I think this comes back to one of our previous posters' comments about some of these parents just being in denial, unfortunately. I teach in Japan, and in Japan, a parent has to voluntarily put their child in special needs classes. If they don't, the student must take normal classes with every other student. I can't tell you how many times I've seen children with severe learning disabilities be forced to sit in a normal class they can't understand, all because a parent is in denial or ashamed that their child isn't normal. Ugh, sounds like we're gonna have a lot of these, aren't we? My wife teaches, and I'm her assistant. I help with grading papers, posting grades, classroom help with computers. She teaches special ed, mostly with inner city children who have never been able to learn to read. She can teach anyone to read. 3 years ago, she was working with a boy who was in 7th grade and unable to read. After a few months, she got him up to 3rd grade level. Then his mom came to the school very angry. "You gotta stop this or I'm gonna lose his learning disability check if they find out he can read. Mind your own damn business." Oh my god, is this really that popular of a thing? Right now, parents think excused absences means the student doesn't have to make up work. I've had 4 parents call me in the past week calling me out for their kids' grades being lowered, all because they didn't do the makeup work and got a 0. Their only argument is, well, it's an excused absence. Preschool teacher here. One year, I had a set of twins with some serious behavioral problems. They wouldn't do anything we wanted them to. They participated in nothing and did only what they wanted to do when they wanted to do it. Cleanup time? My dad says that I shouldn't have to clean up because I'm not a girl. WTF? Did he really just say that? Yes, every single class. There were many conferences with the parents. The dad insisted the kids were fine and they could do what they wanted. We'd explain that in order for us to teach them anything, including how to behave appropriately in a classroom setting before kindergarten next year, he'd have to tell them to listen to us. But he felt that his 4-year-old boys shouldn't listen to any woman, including their own mother, who had so little control over them that she never took them out of the house, which she reported they had completely destroyed. Their behavior was so terrible that we assumed they were on the spectrum before we spoke with their dad. And maybe they were, but mostly they've been raised to believe that women are never in a position of authority. And the worst part, they had a younger boy and another on the way. That poor woman. Her husband had completely hobbled her ability to raise them while leaving her to raise them alone while he worked. They told the director they were moving back to the Middle East just before she kicked them out for being utterly unmanageable. Oh, it really sounds like this father's raising these kids to be a couple of little hellions. I had a parent ask what I taught the kids about Martin Luther King Day because his kid came home and said that white people hate black people. Of course I didn't tell your 1st grader that. Racism is in the 2nd grade curriculum. My friend is a 6th grade teacher. The way her middle school works is that she's in charge of a class of about 25 kids. She teaches them a few subjects. I know math, science, and reading and spelling. She then switches with her partner teacher to teach his kids the same subjects while he does social studies and whatever other subjects there are with her class. Not too long ago, kids in her class began to complain that things were missing from their desks. They were able to keep the things they didn't need for their lessons in the other room in their desks. Whole lunches turned up missing, all in the vicinity of this one boy. Her partner eventually caught him with something that was reported missing, and the principal made him empty his pockets. He was stealing everything. They were lenient with him, only sternly warning him not to do it anymore. The next time, they called the school security officer in to speak with him and sent a note home to his parents. The 3rd time, they gave him in-school suspension and called his parents for a conference. His dad apparently flipped out on the phone, saying that his son did nothing wrong and that he knew what they were doing. Turns out, the boy was telling his parents that his teachers were planting the stolen items on him to get him in trouble, and his parents believed this. My poor friend is so frustrated, even though he's not technically in her class, and she's been trying to get him and his parents to speak with the social worker, but it's been to no avail. Kid sounds like an early kleptomaniac or something. A mother from the PTA offered to buy the food for the teacher luncheon during their workshop day. She went out and bought the food, and when she turned in the receipts to be reimbursed, we noticed the bottoms were torn off. It just so happens this is where the payment information is. What ended up happening is that this lady bought food with her EBT card and had the school refund her in cash for what she bought. So basically, the school was converting her EBT money into cash to spend on whatever she wanted. I once saw the parents of a football player have a stern talk with the coach because his son wasn't the starting inside linebacker. Part of what made it delusional is that his son was starting at outside linebacker, so he was already getting more playing time than the 30 or so other players that didn't have a starting role. What made it even more delusional was that the guy's son was essentially playing inside linebacker anyways. We ran a 40-base defense under the look of a 4-3 defense. That means that before every play, our strong safety moves into the outside linebacker role, and one of the outside linebackers becomes an inside linebacker. I don't know football at all, but it sounds like this dad already had what he wanted. I had an undergrad student sleep through my cell biology lab classes where the majority of their project is meant to be self-motivated. As the teacher's assistant, I teach techniques, but I'm not meant to do the project for them. At the end of the semester, this kid was failing, and I got an email from his mother telling me that clearly I wasn't doing my job because her son couldn't possibly be failing my lab. I responded by recommending he get a full 8 hours of sleep a night when retaking the course the following year. Back when I was doing my practice teaching, I sat in on a parent-teacher interview between my supervising teacher and the parent of a child who had an exceptionality. The interview was fairly standard, with the teacher showing the parents a few samples of the student's work, commenting on how well the 17-year-old was getting at printing his name, and how he was doing well remembering a few details from fairy tales and the like. It was not until the parent asked the teacher what university program his child should take that I realized how clueless the parent was. The student could neither read nor write and had been in special education classes for all of his schooling. University was not in the cards for this one. While teaching first grade, I came across a girl that had already been held back in kindergarten, but was still failing in the first grade. She couldn't read, never did her homework, and never put any effort into catching up with her classmates. One day, out of the blue, she told me that if the school tried to hold her back again, her mother had told her that they would just move back to the last state they lived in. It infuriated me that even in the first grade, her mother had already instilled the idea in this little girl that she could run away from any problems, and that would be easier than putting forth any effort. The girl did move back to that other state before the year was over, and I think about how hard her life is going to be as she grows up with that mentality. Another case of the parents just not doing the child any favors. You gotta teach the kid to put in a little effort sometimes.
Girls, how do you know when a guy is genuinely good and not just trying to get into your pants? I used to think that I was kind of obligated to have sex with my boyfriends when they wanted it just because that was what you did in order to be a good girlfriend. A few of my exes expected sex, so I just complied, even if I wasn't feeling well or was tired or whatever. One day, I was really sick and my current boyfriend was helping me out. I told him that I felt really bad, but I just didn't think I could have sex that night. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "I don't need to have sex with you to love you." I learned a lesson that night about what a good man is. Remember, people, you do not have a right to sex. It is simply a privilege. When he does a nice thing, then doesn't make a big deal out of it because he's doing it for the sake of being a good person rather than hoping to get something extra out of it. Like if someone gives you a lift home and doesn't mention it ever again, except to accept or reject monetary payment. Nice guys, trademark, will give a lift home and then not let you out of the frickin' car afterwards saying, "Wow, that was a really nice thing I did for you. What are you going to do for me?" I've never really liked the nice guy moniker. I know where it comes from. I get it. The whole "I'm such a nice guy. Why does no one want to date me?" So why don't we just, scrap the nice guy moniker and call them what they really are. Sexual opportunists. The night I knew I'd marry my husband was before we even started dating. I knew he'd been interested for a few months, but I wasn't available and he respected that. Never pushed boundaries I had set. One night, I was working a late shift and got ready to leave at about 10 p.m. I'd been dropped off earlier in the afternoon because my dumb butt forgot to put gas in my car, so it was sitting on the side of the freeway about half an hour drive away. I called my ride multiple times, nothing. I called my roommate, nothing. Called my friend that lived in the same town, nothing. I sent out texts, and after half an hour, no replies. I knew my coworker, now husband, lived in a town between where we worked and where I lived. I decided to call up a guy I barely knew outside of work and hope he was as kind as he seemed to be. 15 minutes later, he was picking me up. Of course, I was embarrassed and beside myself that no one had answered my calls and texts. He drove me to the nearest 24-hour store, bought a gas jug, drove to a gas station, went in to pay for the gas, came out with a cup of coffee too. It was just turning cold out. Drove me back to my car car, got me squared away, and followed me back to the same gas station so I could fill up in case something went wrong. Y'all, I had plenty of money, I'm just forgetful. I stated this multiple times throughout the night. He just kept saying, "You've had a long day, let me help." We get to the gas station, he fills up my tank and came back out with a pack of the brand of cigarettes I smoked at the time. Neither of us smoke anymore, but that was part of how we bonded starting out. Me, you didn't have to do that. Him, you said you were out. Me, I can buy a pack in the morning. You keep them. Him, you know I don't smoke this brand. And hands them to me. We're standing there, having a smoke, wrapping up the night, and I just start tearing up and tell him, "I'm glad you exist." That's been something we repeat to each other now and then to this day. He never brought it up after that, except years later to tell me how angry he was that no one came to get me, and to confess that no one had ever told him they were happy he existed, and that he was happy he hadn't decided to drink that night like he normally would have. I wish someone told me they were happy I existed. But seriously, that's just beautiful. Just beautiful. If he remembers little details about you, like your dog's name or your sister's job, i.e. he actually pays attention when you talk. If he remembers the answer you gave when he asked, "What's up?" by following up with, "Oh, how did insert thing you did here go?" If he makes an effort to talk to you instead of just bugging you to hang out with him. If he doesn't constantly try to steer conversations towards flirting/sexual comments. If he's perfectly fine with you not being able to hang out if stuff comes up. Those are some of the things I look for, but then again, I've been fooled before. Trust your gut too. It's unrealistic to expect a guy to remember every little thing about you, but if he recalls something small, it proves he was paying attention. There are other ways guys can show this, like by asking more specific questions and remembering general facts about your life. If a guy puts effort into knowing you, he's genuine. Yeah, that's solid advice. Or, more probably, he's trying to steal your skin so he can insert himself into your life seamlessly by knowing everything about you, and then everyone grows to love him more than you, and he's some kind of superior version of you, like that run of Spider-Man where Dr. Octopus stole Spider-Man's body and became the superior Spider-Man, and then Peter Parker eventually got his body back, but that won't happen for you! Respect your boundaries. It wasn't until my current BF that I realized my feelings of feeling weirded out by all the guys before him was justified. They always pushed when I expressed hesitation or discomfort. I told my BF I wasn't ready, and he didn't make a move again for another 2 months until I was ready and initiated myself. Well, that certainly sounds like a long time in my unga bunga boy brain. I agree that boundaries should be respected. If you think the girl's worth waiting for 2 months, and by God, you respect that 2 months and you wait. I knew my husband was a keeper. He had been my friend first, but we lost contact because he had a crazy girlfriend. When we reconnected, she was officially his ex-girlfriend, but I had an emotionally abusive fiancé. He talked me out of it. He helped me get the courage to leave, and then he waited for me to heal. I gave him no time frame. I told him that I needed to be single before I made another commitment because he deserved to have all of me and be more than a rebound. Neither of us saw other people. We talked every day. I told him he didn't have to wait, but he insisted. When we saw each other again for the first time, he was an OTR truck driver. It clicked. We were meant to be. He switched to regional driver, I went back to college, and now we're building our lives. 7 years together, 4 married. That was nice. Easy. They treat you the same when the passion starts to decline and you are no longer tearing each other's clothes off. I know that makes my relationship sound bad, but long-term relationships go through these phases. When both parties are tired, stressed, etc., if your man stands by you, then he's a keeper. Short-term, I suppose, just wait until you know them before you sleep with them. That's not something I have been good at, though. I suppose just don't get emotionally invested in something that has not been properly defined. More solid advice. I like it. When my BF and I first got together, we were still teenagers. I got really drunk at a party and my friend bailed on me. I didn't have a ride or place to sleep that night. He took me to his house, brought me glasses of water and snacks, and didn't make a move on me all night, even when I slept in his bed in my underwear. We've been together for 4 years now. That's nice, even sweet, I might say, but also a pretty low bar to hold. Nice guys are nice to you. Nice guys are nice to people they don't want to get anything out of. I also have a theory that nice guys, in the you should have sex with me, I'm a nice guy sense, don't realize that being nice is the bare minimum, and thus you have to bring something else to the table. Be funny, be smart, be interesting. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some appeal in aesthetic, but don't claim nice like that's an achievement. You're supposed to be nice. Bragging about it is a sign that you don't understand that, and it's a pretty good indication that it's not genuine. genuine. I'll admit sometimes I think a lot of people just get that impression of like, oh, this is how a girl will like me by watching like, I don't know, those really typical anime where a guy is just like, you know, the bare minimum of nice to someone or kind in some small way, and the girl's like, oh, no other guy's ever been like this before. Newsflash, boys, a majority of men in the world are not scumbags or total pieces of crap, and there is some solid competition out there. And if you want to compete, well, guess what? Self-improvement of the body and mind is necessary. You can never know, and I'm not a girl, but my significant other says that she could tell with me because I was the same around her as I was with my friends and her friends. I was respectful to her family, and I had a good career. Even then, there was skepticism at the start, but I just kept hanging out with her, and then we just had sex one day. It was a good day. Well, I guess it's not bad to get another perspective on the matter. It's really hard to initially tell. Usually I play it safe and don't really bring up anything sexual for a while. And if they're the type to really want sex and nothing else, usually they'll start making every conversation about it and almost insisting something happens soon. The ones you stick with are the ones that respect your boundaries and stay friends with you for you, not just your body. Oh, I don't know, there are some patient ones out there. But this individual is certainly not wrong. Watch his behavior. A genuinely good guy will invest his time in you. Even if he's been busy, he'll reach out to see how your day was because he cares. Want to learn things about you. It won't be superficial facts. He wants to know about who you are, your hopes, family, the things most important to you. Support you. He will want to know your hopes, dreams, and ambitions. For example, you need to study and there's a party he wants you to go to with him. If you tell him your studies are more important, he won't pressure you or guilt trip you for not going. Show you off. He will want to go on dates, post pictures with you, tell his friends and family about you. He doesn't want to confine you only to his apartment or bedroom. Engages in meaningful conversation. He will try to connect on more than just a physical level. It will be intellectual and emotional. A lot can also be said from a guy's language. Listen for the way he speaks. Does he say you're beautiful or puts you down? You should do more squats. Only talk sexually about your looks. Watch his eyes. There's a difference between a loving look and a lustful look. Keep in mind that everyone has flaws and nobody is perfect. To expect anyone to complete a checklist on a daily basis is excessive. We are human. Mistakes happen. But with a genuinely good man, it won't be an everyday occurrence. He will care and always strive to improve. These are just a few differences that I've noticed about the players and the man who treats me like a princess. Hope it helps you. Best of luck. You meet your Prince Charming. Pretty much hit the nail on the head. With my current boyfriend, I knew it was when he invited me to meet his best friend. His best friend is old enough to be his dad, but they trust each other so much. They help each other with racing and are very close. Another sign is when he would tell me what people would say at work. His co-workers would joke about me or ask about me. So that meant they knew about me, and he talked about me. That's a huge sign. Yeah, I like this how I like my women. Short and sweet. That's actually an utter lie. I like tall women because I don't have to lean down to give them a kiss. You know a guy is genuinely good if he has a large anime collection that ranges from figures, manga, DVD sets, and if he has a katana, wears a dashing fedora, has a well-kept and well-moisturized neckbeard by Mountain Dew, Doritos, and grease, weighs at least 300 pounds, lives in his mom's basement at 37. Honestly, these types of guys are so much more genuine than a typical Chad trying to get laid. Picturing the dude from YOLO, Crystal Fantasy, or I don't know, he was better in the sequel, to be honest. He was hilarious in the sequel series. Reputation. Is he known in the friend circle for being a player? Stage in life. Does he talk about settling down with someone? Does he associate that someone with you? Personality. How does he behave around his close friends? What do they talk about? Does he keep his promises? Previous relationships. Does he have a previous long-term relationship? Did he have stages of one-night stands? Cheating history. Did he ever cheat before? If you're allergic to some food, does he avoid bringing that food near you? If you are sick, is he by your side? If you want to see him more often, does he make an effort to compromise? Yeah, that's all pretty correct stuff to be looking out for if you're, gauging a man for his long-term value, I guess. It's not a bad thing to think about, ladies. It's generally easiest to tell through how they treat people differently, but seeing them learn about your relationship status is obviously a shortcut if it's available to you. It's always a bummer when you're having a great time with a group of people and a guy you you were hitting it off with, you platonically in your view, learns you're in a relationship and immediately starts to ignore you. It always really makes me sad, not that it happens a ton. I'm not a smoke show or anything. It's like, oh, I guess I'm just not as funny and interesting as I thought I was. That person didn't actually enjoy our conversation. He was just working on a potential lead. It really brings you low as a woman to see that guy continue to enthusiastically socialize with other guys in attendance after he stopped talking to you upon discovering your unavailability. I acknowledge the potential downsides to being on the male side of this equation. I was aware of them already, but now I've got an inbox nice and full of the same few messages over and over about how I just need to see it from a different perspective. I'm only trying to share my own experience and my own perspective of the downsides for women. You know, that's an aspect that I've never really thought about. Not that I've ever chosen to just blatantly ignore a woman after finding out that she's taken or anything like that. But I also naturally understand the male perspective as well. Wherein, if you're a half-decent guy, if a woman says no, not interested, or I have a boyfriend, I'm unavailable, whatever the reason is, you're just gonna move on, get on with your time, and keep on looking. And while patience may be a virtue, why get your hopes up in thinking that something could happen in the future that very well may never happen? You've already been disappointed, potentially even laid your soul bare. And some men, honestly, just don't have the stomach to look someone in the eyes that they've exposed themselves to. But again, I absolutely get where this woman is coming from. I never really thought about it like that. If he has crippling trust issues, he already doesn't expect anything from you. He doesn't expect anything from anyone. I feel like a dude wrote this. And yet, I hear that. I've found a really good checklist to be, is he trying to elicit a specific behavior or response from me? Or is he being sincere? Is he focused on how the situation affects him or how it affects me/the people around him? Example, I've had both good guys and nice guys tell me they had feelings for me. The nice guy said, well, I just don't understand why you won't go out with me. Like, what else could I do? You're the perfect girl for me. You don't know how hard it is to see the perfect person for you and not be able to have them. The good guy said, since we're friends, I think I owe it to you to be totally honest and tell you that I've started developing feelings for you. You don't have to reciprocate or anything right now. I just wanted to be upfront so things don't get weird later. Both hyperbole, I'm sure, because I don't think anyone actually speaks like that. Also, I'm seeing a lot of checklists on here. Women, can you just tell me, is that a thing you do? You just look for checklists on, how to spot the ideal man for you? I agree with the other posts, but to add something less conventional that might not apply to all guys, I find that when a guy is really, really interested, then they sometimes act nervous or hesitate a little. Makes it less likely that they're trying to get into someone's pants kind of guys and genuinely likes you and doesn't want to fudge it up. Oh, most definitely. I'll always remember the most nervous I was when I asked my girlfriend, do you want to play Sonic Adventure 2 Battle on the GameCube?
Guy here. Everyone is a butthole about something. Grammar Nazi. Goes on and on about the difference between Star Trek and Star Wars. Obnoxious around sports. Obnoxious around politics. Snobbish about beer. Crossfitter. Gamer. Etc. Most of us learn to be civil about our buttholery, but we learn to manage it and recognize that it's kind of unacceptable. We apologize for it, but we don't hide it. If you can't find a guy's metaphorical butthole, he's definitely not a nice guy. The Duke couldn't agree more.
That's enough unnecessary editing on my part, but there was something vaguely Duke Nukem-esque about that comment for some reason. So my boyfriend and I were friends for a couple of years before we got together. I was dating another guy the entire time. I actually fell for current BF while dating the other guy. X was an abusive butthole. I didn't cheat on him, so regret nothing. He was into me and very much wanted to date me, but since I had a boyfriend, he accepted that it wasn't possible and was content to be my friend. Although I complained about the ex to him all the time, he had never once badmouthed him or disrespected our relationship. And when it got painful for him to be in love with a girl he couldn't have, he didn't take it out on me. He simply distanced himself a bit and let himself heal. He's a good man. That is pretty darn nice. I'm glad things worked out for them. I let guys know in advance that my pants are off limits. The ones who seem unfazed by this are generally better guys than the ones who pull a face and try to negotiate. Not even if the terrorists have placed a bomb in your nether regions and my penis is the only thing big or small enough to get to it and disarm it? Bruno, how would your penis even operate the complicated bomb disarming gear?
I've been training for this very specific event my entire life.
If he treats me like a normal human being and not a locked chest in a video game and/or a math problem. That being said, sometimes you don't know until you do it with them and they turn into complete buttholes. I had a really close friend who acted like a genuine, real friend for about a year and a half without trying to get in my pants, and then completely ghosts me once we had sex. It was really bizarre and kind of screwed up. A good tip to discern the latter. If they have a certain reputation or they treat you differently than others, it's a yellow flag and you should look a bit closer. So that's what women mean when they say they don't want to jeopardize the friendship. If his face lights up when he sees you, he respects when you say no, remembers your likes and dislikes, and he takes care of you when you're sick as a dog, even though you're contagious. You'll never find, as long as you live, someone who loves you tender like I do. When he does the right thing, even when he's conflicted at times, being aware of how his actions may make someone feel and is in tune with other people's emotions, not crossing boundaries with a lady, ever. After typing this, I feel like I'm asking for too much. Even I'm not this perfect. But no one needs to be perfect for someone to love them. Your question is vague, and if you want generic advice, just keep on scrolling through the numerous comments on what makes a good guy. A good guy is a subjective measure, so it's what works for you. That's why women struggle to leave abusive relationships, because somewhere in them, they find a good guy. Don't overanalyze this because it has to work for you. You should feel comfortable with the guy, and most importantly, you should have fun and it should be easy. If it's a struggle, then walk. What's stopping you? He hasn't gotten your pants already, so why are you worried of walking? If you're a good judge of character, you will get more good guys than bad, but that's because you judge character better and select more compatible matches, not because there are more or less good or bad guys out there. Reality is, all guys want to get in your pants. If we didn't, then we would be gay and want to get in another dude's pants. Your actual question is, how do I keep a guy in my pants? For that, you need to ask yourself, what do I actually bring to the table? Too many girls are just pretty and nothing more. Guys get bored of them and leave them or cheat, and the answer to that is lead a fulfilling life. Have interests, be curious, confident, and genuine. If you're an interesting woman that is able to look after herself, you will be more appealing to guys, and they will want to stick around. One final thing I would say, beware of the jealous guys that would prevent you from doing this. You need a person who will support you maturing as a human being, but at the same time be comfortable telling you that he doesn't like you seeing your ex, for example. For that, you need a guy who is confident and active and fulfilled himself. I ain't gonna lie, the guy came in pretty hot, sounding snobbish and overall rather disagreeable in general, but that's some solid advice right there. Probably some of the best advice that I've seen on this thread. My husband was the first guy I ever went on a real date with. On said date, it started raining while we were taking a walk outside, and he took off his jacket just to hold it over me. Before that, I thought real dates didn't actually happen anymore. He's always been the kindest and gentlest man I've ever had in my life. Never judges me or puts me down in any way. Even when guys are trying to act like they care to get in your pants, they are terrible at it and end up saying or doing something degrading. Well, you sound quite happy with your husband, but that also sounded like a low note to end on, and I shall not allow it. My husband and I didn't kiss until we got engaged, and didn't do anything past that until we were married. It's been 11 years now, and we're still going strong. I know it's not a popular way to go about it, but it worked for us. Oh yeah! Good old Christian boys and girls in the house! But for real though, I have mad respect for people who can wait that long and be that dedicated to one another without, being intimate like that. I mean, I said at the very beginning, my Unga Bunga man brain says to me 2 months to wait that long is a pretty long time. If you gave me that as a definitive time to wait that long for intimacy, I might make myself a goddamn advent calendar for like Christmas time with the chocolates in it to, give myself something to look forward to every day.
People who separated or got divorced within 1 year of getting married, when did you know it was a mistake? Not me, but my dad. He got remarried after being divorced for about 5 years. I would have been all for it, but he met this woman in another state on a business trip and would travel up to see her every weekend after they hit it off. They knew each other for 6 months before getting engaged. The engagement was only for 3 months. My brother and I tried telling him about all the red flags, telling him to take his time. My dad is very well off financially, and we kept trying to teach him things were moving too quickly, that she was only in it for the money. She moved her whole family from their hometown to the city my dad lived in, including their elderly grandmother who needed constant medical supervision. Before they were even married, the pantry was full of Whole Foods brand food instead of the local grocery store, as was tradition. We had all new furniture, and the house had to be repainted, all at his bride-to-be's request. The marriage lasted all of 2 weeks. Apparently, my dad's bride had the gall to ask my dad to leave everything to her in the will and write me and my brother out. Only then did he realize she was in it for the money. The next day, he had the marriage annulled. Someday, I'd like to know what it's like to fall so completely for someone that I don't recognize they're taking advantage of me. Must feel good for that instant before it all comes crashing down. When he choked me against a wall at a party, he was mad that I laughed at another guy's joke. People were passing by us, but just kind of looked and kept going. Lots of other stuff happened too, but it took me a while to wake up and break away. I was in denial for too long. Back in the early 1980s, I spent 6 years in the US Navy. In 1986, I was recruited to go into the US Army through a program for technical and intelligence experienced military personnel to become warrant officers. All the Navy offered me was sea duty and more sea duty. It looked like a real good deal. I was engaged to a young lady 3 years my junior and had a bit more than $20,000 in savings. Everything looked promising with a new career and family life. The wedding went off without a hitch. I was looking at a vacation of about 3 months between exiting the Navy and entering training for the Army. It was when my recruiter contacted me over my security clearance that things went south. My credit report did not match my questionnaire. There was 3 credit cards with a $14,000 balance I didn't mention. It was no big deal, they weren't delinquent, but I needed to amend my answers to account for them. Turns out my wife had opened up a charge card at our bank, then got a couple of store cards around town. She had purchased some serious clothes and jewelry, but the real kicker? She had bought a horse. She had taken lessons as a child and decided this was going to be her new thing. There was the price of the animal, riding gear, saddle and tack, vet bills, stable fees, yada yada yada. I ended up dumping a big chunk of my savings into paying down these cards, then amending my questionnaire responses. She was from a very blue-collar family. They were very good people who worked hard for everything they had. But I don't think credit ratings and compound interest rates were much discussed at the dinner table. So I explained about credit cards, the huge interest rate, how long it would take me to pay one down, then about security clearances, and having a huge debt with no job would affect it. I treated all of this as a bump in our relationship, but things got dark real fast. My ship date was coming up, and things had to be done before I started training. I was in good physical shape, but I was facing boot camp, AIT, airborne school, ranger school, warrant officer selection, and advanced training. Basically 18 months of utter insanity. I was prepared for what I faced, but there was a lot that could go wrong. If I got through it, I was a warrant officer. But if I dropped the ball along the way, I would not only be enlisted, but junior enlisted in a job they would decide for me. In theory, I could end up a line cook in some chow hall at Camp Nowhere. About a week later, the phone rings. It's about the horse. No one was taking care of the animal or cleaning the stable or even feeding the poor thing. The stable had covered down for the sake of the animal, but we're now charging $350 a week for the extra services my wife was supposed to be doing. She was leaving our apartment every day, and I assumed it was for riding in care of the animal. And for the first week, she was. The second week, she was lawyer shopping. She wanted out. She must have gotten wind of what happened at the stable and didn't come home that night. The next day, I got served with papers. Total marriage time, 47 days. So I ended up with an apartment with 4 months on the lease, no car, and a horse. I found a new home for the horse. I had to defer my ship date and it took 14 months to settle the divorce. My security clearance was approved 2 days after the papers were filed. I shipped the next day. In the end, I had 2 pair of pants, 3 shirts, and a pair of shoes that had no business on anyone's feet. I was working 2 minimum wage jobs, 14 hours a day, paying down debt, lawyer's fees, rent, and sometimes eating to get by. I ended up at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, mowing lawns for 2 months as I shipped without a training slot for boot camp. I wasn't happy, but I was relieved. In airborne school, I met a cadet who was going to airborne school for her summer break. She had a year to go before her commission, and we hit it off. We'd get together on holidays, between training and long weekends. When I finished training and got my warrant, still a cadet, she flew across the country to give me my first salute. I gave her a silver dollar as per tradition. 2 months later, she received her commission, to which I saluted her and returned the silver dollar. Married that Christmas. We've been together for 31 years. Well, as horrible as it went the first time around, I'm glad you were able to find someone that worked with you. I knew a week after I got married when he slammed my head into the wall because he saw me looking at a man at an ice cream shop. I'm from the US and got married in England. This dude completely changed right after we got married. A couple of weeks later, I had to get out of there and come back to the US. I don't understand why this is such a thing, how you hear about people all of a sudden changing drastically after getting married. In this case, the guy got violent. Like, were you just holding it all in for a couple of years while you were dating and you think, now we're married so I can just let it all out? That's not how that works. You still have to continue to be a good person while you're married too. She nearly killed me because she thought I was cheating from some text that I sent to my mother. I was blindsided by it. We had lived together for a year, about an hour from my hometown. We relocated upon her request and desire to my hometown prior to our marriage, so that when we had kids, it's best to be close to family. We had a house we loved, a dog we loved, jobs we both loved working in. Or so I thought. Married in October. She goes to visit her sister over the next Labor Day weekend, and I can't attend due to work. Comes back the Tuesday after Labor Day and tells me she's living a lie in someone else's dream, and that she needs a divorce. I had no idea. The divorce was finalized in January. She married some dude that her sister was friends with, that she had met on that trip I was unable to attend. The following September. Life is wild sometimes. This one feels really bad because you were just completely blindsided by this. It sounds like this girl really doesn't know what she wants and is still kind of figuring it out. I'm sorry you had to go through that. On the honeymoon. We dated for 5 years, but on the honeymoon, we had a big argument over my liberal use of sunscreen. She refused to wear any because of chemicals, and I liberally use it due to my ginger skin. We seriously argued over this for a good hour, and she refused to even go into the pool with me because of the sunscreen chemicals. After a scuba adventure with her, she could barely walk because she got so burnt on her legs, whereas my skin didn't change. She then tried to convince me that it was all my fault because I didn't force her to wear the sunscreen and that the honeymoon was ruined. It was then that I realized I picked the wrong person. After a few more psycho arguments, mad at me because of something in her dreams, mad at me because I didn't bring an umbrella, I had to call it quits. I can't stay with someone who constantly blames me for their own problems. Luckily, no kids, and I got back everything I brought into the marriage. Weren't there warning signs before this though? Like, you say you were together for 5 years, and now all of a sudden on the honeymoon she's acting like this? You must have seen this behavior before. Not me, but my sister's friend. Her sister got engaged 8 months into a relationship and got married 4 months later. Everything went well the first 5 months, but the husband started acting different. He wasn't chatty, his good morning and good night kisses became dull, and things like that. Her sister would ask if everything was okay, and he would say, "I'm fine," every time. Her sister didn't want to push him, so she waited for him to talk about what's bothering him. One evening, after eating dinner, the husband said he wanted to talk about their relationship. Before he could talk about it, he started crying. He cried for a few minutes and then told her he's gay. The sister filed for divorce, and after the divorce was settled, she wasn't really mad at him anymore. So she went to see him and forgave him. They became good friends, and the sister helped him become comfortable with his sexuality. She even helped him come out to his close friends and then to his family. 5 years later, the sister is now engaged to another man and expecting their first child. The ex-husband is now very happily married to a man for almost a year now. I'm glad we got one nice happy ending out of all of these. She went out for a girls' night and met a new friend named Nicole at a bar. She started texting her a lot, then going to hang out now and then. We had a baby at home and she kept trying to go hang out with this girl from another town over with no last name who I was not allowed to meet. His real name was Wesley. Ouch. I kind of thought she was going to turn out to be a lesbian, not going to lie. I'd been fooling around with this girl for a while. I never wanted anything serious, and I knew that from the start. Then my mom was killed. I went into a deep depression, and this girl was there for me. Her mom had died of cancer about a year earlier, and I guess we really bonded over that. It pushed us much further emotionally than we ever should have gone. We ended up doing a courthouse marriage. I knew within the first month that I had messed up, but I didn't want to just give up and get divorced. Once the emotions of my mom's death passed, I realized how toxic she really was. She was an incredibly unstable person and ended up taking me into an even deeper depression. We divorced about a year ago after being married for about 10 months, and I was immediately much happier. Marriage shouldn't be taken lightly, but people also shouldn't force themselves to be in unhealthy relationships. We all make mistakes. Don't waste your life with someone that doesn't deserve you. It can be hard to end a relationship for a lot of different reasons. Something like this, I really do understand. You were both in a tough place and needed each other for support, but you just took it further than it was ever really meant to go. My sister got a civil marriage, then they moved super far away to the middle of nowhere because he got a good job. My sister never finished college, and he would remind her on a daily basis about it. She would get super depressed, and he wouldn't believe her. She got sick once, and he told her that since she didn't go to the DMV that day, she wasn't allowed to go to a theme park we were planning on going to that weekend. He would demean her whenever she couldn't get a job, or even an interview, and she applied to practically everywhere within a 50-mile radius. He called her stupid in front of me, and when I called him out, he told me to mind my own business. If he wasn't twice my size, I would have decked him. She left him after about a year because he's obviously a raging jerk. When she left, he told her she has nowhere to go, and if she went to stay with our mom, she would just be a burden like me. I was 19 and in college at the time. He's a rude jerk, but at least she got the car and the dog. This dude sounds like more of a waste of skin than he was ever accusing her of being. A cousin of mine divorced her husband after 6 months. She knew when we had to pick her up from her home after having been recently beaten. That day, we packed up all her stuff and never let her go back. The day after we got married, he slapped me across the face, hard and completely out of the blue. No argument, no conversation leading up to it, nothing. He said it wasn't that hard of a hit, and he was just joking around and I was being dramatic. He had never gotten violent with me while dating, but as soon as we got married, it was like a switch flipped, and he was a completely different person. It got worse very quickly, and I ended up filing for divorce 73 days after we got married. My mother-in-law got married for the first time when she was really young, left him a month later. Turns out he was a raging alcoholic. She had no idea because her family was super overprotective, and they were never really allowed to spend time together alone before they got married. Who knew that spending time with someone could be the key to knowing if they're a good partner? That's why I could never get behind the idea of an arranged marriage. The whole thing just sounds crazy to me. Not within a year, but about 18 months. She was constantly complaining she didn't have friends after moving in with me, joined a local soccer team, and she talked about one teammate non-stop for months. I had a bad feeling about it from the get-go, but she assured me they were just friends, and how dare I not trust her. I thought I was going crazy because my gut told me something wasn't right, but I was punishing myself for being a bad husband and not trusting my wife. Turns out it was all true. She'd been screwing the teammate for months. She was most likely screwing someone else during our engagement. We officially split amicably as of last week without any mess, thank God. A cousin of mine married someone who seemed like the perfect woman. They worked in the same store together, and he would brag about how his wife was getting promoted quickly in the company. A few months into the marriage, she tells him she's going out with friends for the evening. An hour or so later, my cousin gets a call from one of his friends. The friend saw her having dinner in a restaurant with the manager of the store that they both worked at. Once he confronted her about it, that was basically the end of the marriage. I mean, if she's not a great worker, then her getting all those promotions might have been an earlier clue. I got married in late May. By August or September, I found out from my dad that my husband, now ex, and my brother's wife were sending some inappropriate texts back and forth. She was also my bridesmaid at my wedding. She felt guilty and told my dad, who had to tell me. I forgave him like a dingus, and about a year and a half later, I found pictures of him fooling around with 2 different guys in our house, and also wearing quite a bit of my nice makeup. Of course, all of this after we moved to Washington from Florida. It's been wild, but we're obviously divorced now. Whoa, so this dude was just willing to fool around with anyone, it sounds like. My brother died a week after the wedding, and after about 2 months, he told me that was just too big of a thing to happen in the beginning of a marriage. I tried for 6 more months and then just gave up. It's really sad to hear that the husband couldn't find it in them to be able to support their new wife through a very hard time. Like, this has got to be one of the most selfish things I've ever heard. You'd committed to spending your entire life with someone. Something goes bad in the first week and you're out? I can't begin to understand. A couple of weeks into our marriage, anytime we would fool around, it started to physically hurt. I went to my OB for a test or 2. She informed me that I had contracted chlamydia. That's when I knew. Turns out my newlywed husband had been banging his coworker for months. The day after the wedding, when he poked me in the chest and said, "You're gonna do what I say whether you like it or not." Big mistake. I feel like this one could have been playful, but obviously you're the judge of his tone, and it sounds like he wasn't being playful and being serious. In which case, yeah, screw that guy. Best girlfriend I'd had to date at the time. I was in my late 30s and had never been married. Dated for about a year. We got married, and shortly after, she asked to have her name on all of my assets. A few rental houses, the current house, some financial instruments, the cars, and things like that. Not a problem since we're married, I thought. But on a Wednesday, she insisted that it be done by that Friday. I didn't have time to do that because work and a deadline. I could start it the next week, I said. She pitched a fit and said if I loved her, I would do it by Friday. I found this strange and decided not to start it and see what happened. She moved out of our bedroom into a guest room, got cold around the house, told me she would move back into our bedroom when I finished getting everything done. At this point, I thought, bull, and told her so. I went to my family lawyer to seek advice. She advised me not to put anything in her name at this point. Gave me the name of a marriage counselor. She didn't want to go to counseling. She continued to live in the guest room. I took my lawyer's advice and did nothing about the assets. The long and the short of it was that after 1 year of marriage, when on our anniversary, she told me I didn't have her in my heart. I thought to myself, this is bull. About a week after that, I told her if this was the way it's gonna be, I'm not gonna be married like this. She then told me, okay, so what are you gonna give me? Yes, she said that. I consulted my lawyer on what a judge would come up with regarding community property for the past year. Number came up to 20G. I took that number and added another 20 grand and proposed that to her so we can make it easy. I was gonna spend way more than that in lawyer fees if it got ugly. It got ugly. A week later, I got served with papers. With all said in the complaint, when added up, she was going after $750K for 1 year of marriage, 1 year of divorce proceedings, and 2 years of property settlement proceedings on what should have been a 2-hour problem. Judgment came. 215 points in the judgment. I owed her what would have been the community property, about 20 grand, but awarded me attorney's fees. So in the net, she owed me about 30 grand and left her to go buy her own car. Turns out this judge had worked her butt off through school to become a lawyer, and the same to become a judge by 40 years old. I was told by another attorney that normally this judge never gives attorney's fees, but was so peeved off at the gold dig my wife had attempted that she felt it was justified in this case. Even though I came out okay financially, it was an emotional train wreck to have this happen and go through all that. It's been 15 years since it happened. I was not dateable for about 2 years, but now very happy with who I am and who I'm with. Thank God you were able to have a judge that was able to see through this woman's bull. The fact that she ended up having to give you a bunch of money in return just makes it even better. Reddit, what's the funniest thing that a random stranger said to you that made you die laughing inside? I was in the drive-thru of a Wendy's one time. An employee exited the building with his headphones on and was singing "Who Let the Dogs Out" at the top of his lungs. He saw me, stopped singing, and started walking away. A few seconds later, he comes up to my window and said, "Yeah, that is what I'm listening to." Then he walked away. I laughed so hard at the whole situation. I assume he was just doing a bit for his friends inside and you just had the pleasure of witnessing it. Okay, the laughter was not entirely inside, but years ago on the subway in New York, a crazy dude walks on the train and starts screaming at everyone, "You're all going to hell!" and then steps off as the doors close. Total silence as the weirdness of the moment settles in. Then, without missing a beat, guy across from me goes, "Crap, I thought this train was going to Harlem." Entire subway car of cynical New Yorkers bursts out laughing. I gotta admit, that's probably the best response that guy could have come up with. I was helping a customer pick out a new bra, and she said she wanted her breasts to be lifted. She said, "My boobs are so saggy that if my nipples were eyeballs, I'd be able to see if my shoes were untied." I really tried my best to remain professional, but I couldn't stop laughing. She said it to get a laugh out of you. You're allowed to laugh. Was leaving Walmart and the 80-ish-year-old greeter says, "Thanks for shopping at Dollar Tree." Okay, one of two things happening here. Either one, their greeters may be starting to lose it just a little bit, or two, they just like doing it for fun. What are you gonna do, fire the 80-year-old greeter for making a joke? A movie had just ended. Me and my dad joined the mad rush to the bathrooms. Urinals are packed. It's our turn and we're doing our business, and suddenly someone rips a huge fart. It's pretty funny, but we all have manners and we're still peeing. Suddenly this dude proclaims, "It was me!" and runs out the door. The whole bathroom erupts in laughter. I must have been about 10 or 11. I sat down on a bench next to an old guy to sort out my shoe. I took my shoe off and he just turns to me and says, "Are they golfing socks?" I look at him with a completely blank look on my face, thinking, WTF? As I looked away, he just said, "There's a hole in one." This dude saw an opportunity for a dad joke with a random kid and just went for it. I can't say I blame him. The time I was waiting for takeout and the amputee owner struck up a conversation. "My friend, you have to be really careful if you ever get shot in the knee or any leg bone. They don't warn you that you can't have sex for months. One night you're taking home a beautiful girl to show her your scars, and the next morning your leg's gone." I feel like he might not be telling that story correctly. A few years ago, I let a friend cut my hair. It did not go well. I was living in Philadelphia at the time and was walking through South Philly when I passed two strangers in the middle of a conversation. As I pass, one of them says to the other, "Hold up, I gotta talk to this guy." He proceeds to shout at me, "Hey yo, your hair looks horrible, come over here." I was amused, partly because of his bluntness and partially because he wasn't wrong. I was curious, so I walked over to him and he says, "Look, a buddy of mine owns a barber shop 2 blocks away. Here's his business card. I'll write my name on there. If you mention that I sent you, he'll give you a good deal. Bruh, but seriously, take care of that." I never ended up going to his friend's shop, but I frequently use this story as the perfect example of Philly culture. Rude, blunt, and in your face, yet somehow coming from a place of genuine care. Plus, it's just hilarious. A few months ago, I was waiting at a road crossing with loads of other strangers, waiting for the man to turn green. This was a busy main road in my city. The little girl on the other side of the road did the most accurate impression of the beep beep that the crossing makes so blind people know it's safe to cross. And the entire crowd of people just stepped into the road. I had seen her do it, so I stayed put, but I couldn't stop laughing. My girlfriend was very confused. 50 adults pranked by one absolute genius 6-ish-year-old. It was magical. By the way, it was really busy, so traffic was hardly moving. There was no chance of being injured. It could have been a lot worse, but yeah, people need to actually pay attention and not just go off a random audio cue that a 6-year-old gave you. May of 2000, passing through Norwood, Louisiana with a friend. At around 2 in the afternoon, we stopped to gas up and grab some snacks at the most podunk gas station known to man. A young man, extremely agitated, comes in with frustrated gestures and angrily shouts and gestures at the cashier with an accent that is beyond region, beyond stereotyping, beyond anything I have ever heard before. Where you got John Wally Mellion at? At the top of his lungs, approaching hysteria and tears. I feel like I should probably translate this one for you, as I had to read it as it was said. He was asking, where are the god-darned watermelons at? Just to be clear. When I was about 8 years old, 40 some odd years ago, my mother and I were waiting to be seated at a restaurant, and an older gentleman was ahead of us also waiting. The waitress asked him if he'd be smoking, back when that was still a thing in restaurants, and he replied, "No, but I may burst into flames later." Young me laughed all through lunch at that. In fact, it still makes me giggle. The college I attend frequently has local elementary and middle school kids on tours, especially on Fridays. One particular Friday, I was in line for the cafeteria when a group of kids came walking by with a tour guide. One kinda chubby little dude looked a bit uncomfortable. He was biting his lip a little and sweating. This part of the tour is usually where they have a bathroom break, and clearly Buddy needed to go. At this point, I should note that the bathrooms are visible from where we were standing, but the tour guide, a fellow student of mine, didn't seem to notice. She just kept going on and on, talking about the history of the building. I watched this kid go from nervous to deeply anxious to visibly clenching over the span of about 3 minutes. He's staring at the stick figure dude on the men's bathroom sign as if it was the risen Christ. Miss Tour Guide takes a break in her spiel. I figure she's done. The next words out of her mouth will be the ones to free this boy from the purgatory that is having to use the bathroom on a school trip. It'll be over. He'll be free. What followed instead was this. So, in 1995, a professor named ABC Kalamazoo, "Move, lady, I'm gonna poop my pants!" He ran past her to the bathroom and presumably destroyed it. Poor guy. Had the entire line in tears with laughter though. Hey, when you gotta go, you gotta go. Tour guide needs to pick up on these things. When I was a freshman in college, I had a pair of rainbow bell-bottoms that I had made myself and wore quite a bit. I was walking through the city back to the dorms when a guy rode up behind me on a bicycle. He was old, had long scraggly gray hair, and a bright red and yellow windsuit on. He rode beside me for a second, stared, and then yelled, "Miss, your pants are hot! What?" And then rode away into the sunset. It was so random and hilarious. Every time I wore those pants, my friends would run up behind me and yell, "Your pants are what?" Something I overheard as 2 kids walked past our caravan park site. There's a rumbling boom of distant thunder. I like thunder. It sounds like a 200-year-old dog who's retired and helps old people who are blind get around. Kid number 2 doesn't respond. You know? But why is it retired? Because it's old, but it's still helping blind people. Apparently the first kid had no answer for that. Just the other day, checking out at the Cracker Barrel, the older gentleman ringing up my wife accidentally said, with all confidence, "Have a thank you." Sounds like the poor guy just mixed up his catchphrases. Not so much said to me as overheard. Walking down the street with my fiance after dinner, a man and a woman passed by us. Very clearly, I heard the man say, "And that's the second time I got crabs. I just keep a special little comb at the house now, just in case." I'm not sure of any particulars and have thought about that interaction often. So many questions. I know they heard me laugh though. I hope this wasn't like a first date he was on or something. I used to be a smoker. One time, a scruffy-looking man asked me for a light. I told him I only had matches. It was very windy. He said, "That's okay, there's a trick to it. You light the match and then suck down real hard. You get a mouthful of sulfur that way, but you gotta have a trick when you're going 30 miles an hour on top of the tank." I once was canoeing with my fiance for the first time, and we were having a bit of trouble at first getting a rhythm going. So we were along the edge of the water hitting the canal. This random couple was walking along the wall, and the guy said to his wife while pointing at us, "Canoeing, the truest test of love." My fiance and I burst into laughter for 20 minutes, and then finally got our rhythm together. That guy sounds like he's been where you are. "You and your sister look exactly alike." My sister was adopted from Asia. I'm so white I freckle instead of tan. I just about died of laughter because the woman actually meant it. For context, she'd met my sister a couple weeks before, but I hadn't been there, and she'd mistaken me for my sister. I'm as white as a fluorescent light bulb and my foster daughter is black. Of course, I introduce her as my daughter when we're out. Some people would be like, "She's your daughter?" I would pull her closer and point back and forth to our faces and say, "We're practically twins, can't you tell?" That usually got people to laugh. I was at a 50th wedding anniversary party and there were lots of elderly people in attendance. An old man was standing next to me and said, "It looks like a graveyard in here." I literally spit my beer out. We were outdoors. The kicker was the guy was close to the same age as everyone else. I'm in the bathroom at work washing my hands, and one of the professors that I don't think I've ever actually spoken to comes in and starts washing her lanyard in the sink. I try to make small talk with work people even though I suck at it. So I try to strike up a conversation that goes down as follows. "Morning. I spilled coffee on my lanyard and now it's all sticky." Wow, that's the worst. At this point, she turns off the faucet and looks at me completely deadpan, with eyes that said she wanted to feed me my own innards, and said, "I think genocide is worse." So I awkwardly mumbled, yeah, okay, bye, have a nice day, and quickly escaped. It's turned into a running joke in my office now, though. Anything from the printer being out of toner to a fire drill on a cold day is literally worse than genocide. Why did she have to take it to such an extreme? You're just trying to make casual conversation. I watched a guy walking to class at my college years ago saying, "Get the hell out of my way," to a pigeon standing in his path. The pigeon quickly waddled off to the side. I was doing tech support over the phone for an internet company at a call center. I got a call from an elderly woman whose internet had stopped working. After checking that the modem was working and that there were no issues in her area, I was scheduling a visit from one of our technicians, when she suddenly says, "Oh, I know what happened. The cat was playing around the router yesterday." Right. You think it took a cable or something? "No, he probably took away the Wi-Fi." You mean like he moved the router? No, he probably took the airwaves of the Wi-Fi. You know how cats see things we can't. He surely saw the Wi-Fi signal, grabbed it, and took it away. It took all my willpower to finish the call and not laugh in her face. Yeah, sometimes it's easier to just let things go than to try and explain. I was crossing the street once and my sunglasses fell off my shirt directly to the floor. I just realized it had happened after I got to the other side of the street and my mom pointed it out. The closest car was pretty far away, but I was still very anxious about it. I ran back into the middle of the street and tried to grab it, but was so nervous it fell out of my hands 2 times before I finally got it and ran to the other side of the street again. The car finally reaches us and the driver stops, rolls down the windows and says, "That's what I call survival instinct," and drives away. I laughed so hard. Years ago, when queuing up for movie tickets with my family, the attendant asked the ages of our 4 kids to see if they could all get children's price tickets. I announced their ages 7, 9, 11, and 13. Without missing a beat, the stranger behind us declared, "That's an odd group." Don't worry, they'll even out next year. My friend and I, both female, used to go to the Saturday market to buy fruit and veg. My friend is quite shy towards other people. I had just bought 2 huge watermelons and was carrying them, 1 arm each. As a guy walked past us, he shouted, "You've got nice big melons." Didn't say anything else, just kept walking. My friend was shocked, and I almost peed myself laughing so much. First day in basic training. All hell had broken loose. It was just screaming and confusion. I had an instructor come up to me with another kid in tow and yell, "Trainee, do you know where the latrine is? I want to escort this trainee to the latrine so he can go sick himself in the proper facilities." I didn't know where they were, but figured I'd give it my best shot. So myself and this kid walk outside. I look over at him and he's greenish, kind of whimper crying and hunched over. We take 2 steps outside when he pops. Projectile vomit all over the ground. A huge mess. I look up and see an even bigger, scarier instructor rounding the corner about 15 feet in front of us. He walks up, looks the kid in the eye, and with an icy hatred says, What did you just do to my ground? Do you really hate my ground so much you'd sick yourself on it? I want you to apologize to my ground and then clean yourself up. I nearly lost it. The kid whimpered out a, "Sorry I puked on you" ground, and we were on our way. In college, this one girl in the front of the room chimes in on something and mentioned that her eyes change color depending on the summer every year, from blue to green. This black dude in the back of the class whispers to his friend, "Yeah, and I turn white in the winter." I had to remove myself immediately before I made a scene from laughing so hard. I was rollerblading down a hill too fast and landed on my butt. Painful, sure, but not excruciatingly so. An old man walked by and said in the most jolly voice, "Is your behind okay, young lady?" I was shaking of laughter. My behind was okay, yes. I'm a hostess at a restaurant, and my coworker was holding the door open for this table of 4 very old black women. And this woman, who had just celebrated her 102nd birthday, says to her friend, "Can you imagine that? Never thought I'd see the day a white boy holds the door open for us. Oh, if I was younger, I'd have to make my way to you, young man." When I was around 10, my dad took my brother and me to a Sox game at Fenway. We got to the park and I was putting mustard on a hot dog from one of those mustard box push-down nozzle things. This random guy next to me goes, "Yeah, buddy, lather it up." 10-year-old me thought it was about the funniest thing I'd ever heard, and I still chuckle when I think about it as an adult. I'm at a festival and sitting around a campfire when a very intoxicated man kept saying, "I need to borrow your fireplace." He wouldn't let it go, despite being right by the fire. Turns out he needed a lighter for his cigarette and was so drunk that he forgot what it was called. My laughter was not internal. I died laughing right in front of him. I was riding the public bus in Vegas about 13 years ago. I'm sitting kind of in the middle. There's this guy sitting kind of towards the front, having an extremely animated conversation with another guy next to him. The other guy looks like he's barely acknowledging what animated guy is saying. We get to a stop and animated talker guy gets up, but other guy doesn't. It was then that I realized that they weren't together, and that this dude was just talking in a semi-crazy way to some rando dude on the bus. But animated talker doesn't want to get off. He wants the other guy to acknowledge that he was right about something. The other guy is just nodding and trying to get on with his life. But this lunatic just kept yammering away. There gets to be some audible grumbling from the other riders because this dude is now holding up the bus. He finally goes to get off. The dude almost makes it to the sidewalk when he does an about face, gets back on the bus, and yells out, "And another thing!" At that second, nearly everyone on the bus yelled the guy to get off. He obviously wasn't expecting it, as he kind of recoiled and skittered away. The guy does this awkward half-run thing directly into a psychiatrist's office. It was at this moment that an older gruff guy who was sitting in the back and quietly reading a newspaper this entire time pipes up and says, "Going to see the psychiatrist, go figure." Everyone on the bus, including myself, just busted out laughing. Not to me, but I was nearby. I was in a supermarket in the fruit and veg section. 2 women were arguing behind me. One says, "We should get this." The other responds, "No, we're getting this one. It's better, I should know." The first, sounding upset, says, "Yeah, but..." The other interrupts and says, "You know I was a chef. I worked at KFC." I had to go 2 aisles over so they didn't hear me howling with laughter. I don't think it counts as a chef if you work at KFC. You're not really making food. You're just kind of heating it up. I was walking to class the other day and walked by 2 girls FaceTiming their friend, and I hear this. "Oh my god, we saw y'all broke up. What happened?" "He drank directly out of my Brita water filter." If I heard that just walking past me, there's no way I'd be able to contain myself. Little girl to me after I explain my service dog helps me when I'm sick. "Oh, so he's your dog tour." Me trying to keep a straight face. Yes, exactly. Kids got the puns, I gotta say. I never would have thought of that. When I served, I had a table of about 20 Asian people. The head of the group shook my hand and introduced himself as Tony the Tiger. He tried to sound cool and tough, but all I could think of was the cereal mascot. How are you going to name yourself after a cereal mascot and try and take yourself seriously? Come on, buddy. Not me, but one of my customers. He's doing a finishing job for a billionaire in the city, when the designer insists that they use booties or shoe covers. He said he just had his men take their shoes off at the door. Billionaire woman responds, "Peter, their socks on my carpet is like your penis in my vagina. Disgusting." Funniest thing I've heard in a while. That's gotta be one of the harshest burns I've heard in a while. I have a 5.5-pound Chihuahua. He's about as intimidating as a bunny rabbit. I was walking him on the grass along the road. A couple of walkers were coming near me, and my dog started barking at them, so I picked him up. The guy says, "Thank you for picking him up. We were so scared." On the L in Chicago, a group of older guys with shoe shine kits gets off at a stop. One of them drops a small bag of white powder that I presume to be illegal. Another younger guy bends down, picks it up, and tells the guy, "You dropped this." Older guy grabs the baggie and the doors close. Young guy looks at me and says, "I don't know why I did that." I still laugh about it. The young guy was just trying to be polite, and it overrode any other warning signals. I actually did something very similar when I found a couple in the staircase here in my building heating something up in a spoon with a lighter. As soon as I opened the door, they immediately just tried to take off, but they left another lighter sitting on the stairs. I called out to them to come back and handed them their lighter. I knew exactly what they were doing. I don't know why I still felt the need to be polite. What was your "I was only gone X minutes, what the heck happened" story? One night I was on my own and decided to make a nice meal for myself. I spent about half an hour preparing and baking a delicious chicken breast with sun-dried tomatoes and brie cheese. So I got everything ready, set up my dinner and my beer on the coffee table, and sat down to eat and watch some TV. At this point, my cat waltzes in and sat on the couch next to me. Then he dropped something out of his mouth next to me. I turned to look at it, and it was a snake. Okay, no big deal. It's not a big one. So I got up and grabbed some snake wrangling tools, a dustpan and brush, and scooped this little guy up. I walked out the front door and tossed the snake back into the bushes, hoping the cat won't go after it again. I was gone for about 15 seconds. I came back inside and my dinner was gone. The cat was under the table, hunched over a half-eaten chicken breast and growling every time I came near. And that's the first time my cat distracted me with a snake in order to steal my dinner. I was gonna say, this literally sounds like the cat plotted this out to get your food. I left my 2-year-old twins for 2 minutes. They were happily glued to the TV, and I thought it was the perfect opportunity to sneak to the kitchen and finish making my coffee. They continued being quiet, and I found it strange, as they normally come and follow me when I leave the room. I came back, and there was soil scattered all over my carpet. One was feeding the other a plant. It was our first baby. My wife had never left our little girl, but decided to run an errand, leaving me, Dad, alone with her. I assured my wife all would be well in her short absence. The kid is sleeping in my arms. All is quiet. I give my wife a kiss and she heads out the door. I walk back to the sofa with the sleeping kid. Notice the kid could probably use a diaper change. I set the baby on the changing table, I take off the old diaper, and the baby wakes up and proceeds to erupt with a volcano of projectile diarrhea. It's all over me, the changing table, the wall. I'm now panicking. I pick up the baby, who's still hemorrhaging an unending spray of baby turd mist. I take her to the kitchen sink and flip on the water. The water's still cold, so when I set the baby in the sink, the baby starts screaming like a demon. My wife opens the door. She forgot her purse. Poop all over the walls and floor. Desperate poop-covered husband wrestling with desperate freezing poop-covered baby. My wife was gone maybe 90 seconds, max. Back in 2008, when everyone was getting $600 tax rebate checks in the mail, I left mine unopened on my coffee table. Went to use the restroom, and when I got back, I saw the envelope chewed in half, and my dog nowhere to be seen. Somehow, my miniature Dachshund puppy got up on the coffee table, picked through all my other mail to find this specific one, chew it up, and run under the bed, all in about 1 minute. I had to tell the IRS that my dog chewed up my rebate check, which was funny. First day of summer break after grade 7, I went to a skate park with a few friends and one of their dads drove us all. He went to get a coffee and said, "Don't break anything until I get back." And I did not listen. I went down a quarter pipe and broke both my radius and ulna on my first try. He got back and I was sitting on a bench holding my crooked arm. At that point, he's gotta just laugh when he comes back, right? Like, he totally called it. When my daughter was around 3.5, I picked her up from daycare on my way home from work, walked in the door, and set her down in the living room to play while I put the mail I had grabbed on the way into the house on the table in the kitchen, which was less than 10 feet away. I dropped the mail on the kitchen table, turned around, and walked back into the living room, and she's butt naked. It was literally less than 5 seconds. I'm still amazed when I think about it. I can't even get my shoes off that fast. Sounds like maybe she was just trying to play a prank on you. Comcast and FedEx both left a just missed you at my door when I was gone for 5 minutes to shower, during the latter quarter of a 5 to 6 hour time frame. Yeah, we've all been there for this one. I experienced being hunted by a tow truck in Chicago. A friend and I were delivering a couple big monitors to his apartment. We pulled around behind the building, but he didn't have the key for the back door. So we quickly ran around front and came out the back door of his apartment to see the car gone. Like, not going, or the tow truck loading up the car. It was gone. We couldn't have taken more than 90 seconds. Wow, those repo guys are pretty slick, huh? I grew up in the country. One day in high school, I came home, made myself a snack, and then went back outside to eat my snack on the deck. When I got home, the yard was empty. When I came back out, there was a zebra in the yard. And that's how we found out the new neighbors ran an exotic animal petting zoo, and that they weren't very good at it. They lived there for a couple of years, and we got really nonchalant about that zebra getting out. My grandma came to visit once and came in all in a tizzy about it. I think it was even more shocking when our response was basically, "That darn zebra again." I was in middle school. I went to the bathroom because the lesson was boring me out of my mind. You know, I was 12. And I stayed there for around 10 minutes. When I returned to class, I saw 2 cops dragging 2 of my classmates. They were handcuffed and visibly terrified. Found out sometime later that they were arrested for drugs. And the cops came in the class and handcuffed them right there. The cops heard you were bored and came to put on a show. Too bad you weren't there to see it. I was boiling water on an electric stovetop. Seemed safe enough. Left for 30 seconds. Came back and the entire stove was on fire with 2-foot flames. Someone had let some oily food fall between the burner and the tinfoil we keep underneath. Another 30 seconds and the kitchen would have caught fire. I live above the pizza place that I work at. I'm also full-time in college. Last night, they called me in for just an hour or 2 to help close. No big deal. After a full school day and going into work for a bit, I was exhausted. I walked upstairs and into my apartment. There was new decorations everywhere, my furniture was gone, and my bedroom door was open. I screamed, "Holy crap!" and kicked open the door to see who was in my room. I was only gone for an hour. How could someone move in and move all of my stuff? As I made contact with the girl lying in bed watching Netflix, I realized I was on the 2nd floor, not the 3rd floor. The apartment below me has the exact same layout as mine, and this girl happened to have her door unlocked like I usually leave mine. We have multiple roommates. I simply said, "Oops, wrong room," and ran back to my room. I'm going to go down today and apologize for scaring that poor girl half to death at 11 p.m. I went to work one day. I literally lived right across the street from my job, so I walked to work each day. By the time I got to work, my boss told me I needed to go back home. It was an emergency. Apparently, my power had been cut off. My stepdad had flipped out and scared the crap out of my siblings, and apparently attempted to hurt my pregnant mom. Apparently, the power department came out and cut off our power due to non-payment of bills. My stepdad started screaming and cussing about it, which scared my siblings. My mom got into an argument with him, telling him to calm down and demanding to know why the power was cut off. He revealed that instead of paying our bills, he'd been blowing all of the money. This led to more arguing. Stepdad got angrier and started choking my mom, which is when my siblings called my job to have me come home. I had to fight him off. We all got out of the house, went back across the street, and called the cops. This was before cell phones were common. The cops come out about 45 minutes later, question us, take pictures of the marks on my mom's neck, then go question stepdad. The cops come back, escort us out of the the house, tell us to pack our bags, and for us to leave. Stepdad gets to stay in the house, even though he wasn't on the lease. They don't arrest him and tell us we can't come back until my mom has a restraining order against him. We leave and stay with my aunts, and it takes 2 weeks to get a restraining order. Only then are we allowed back in the house, and by then, he's trashed most of our stuff. Nothing was ever done to him except the cops finally made him leave. Wow, this is probably one of the most intense and scary versions of this kind of story. I was working on my senior chemistry project in college. I brought samples down to the NMR room for analysis. I forgot something upstairs, ran up to grab it, came back down, and found a metal folding chair stuck to the instrument. An NMR is similar to an MRI machine in that it's a gigantic sensitive magnet that metal should never be near. In this time I went upstairs, another student thought she left a sample probe in the instrument, couldn't eject the probe, and brought the chair over to look down into the instrument to find it. The chair got stuck to the instrument and she had to find my professor to remove it. Luckily, the magnet did not quench upon chair removal. Yeah, this could have been a very expensive mistake. A little over a year ago, my now husband and I were prepping for a move and needed to take a handful of garbage bags to the dumpster in our apartment community. We patted each of our 2 small dogs on the head and headed out. Less than 5 minutes later, we come back, both of the dogs meeting us at the door with wagging tails and big smiles. All seems perfect until we round the corner into the dining room. One of the dogs had pooped clear up 2 walls, about 4.5 feet up and 6 feet wide worth of wall. I was laughing too hard to clean it up. My husband saved the day and cleaned it up for me. But with such force and distance, we can only imagine the absolutely gut-wrenching noise that dog had to have made when it did its big business. Yeah, that's one where I would probably prefer that it happened when I wasn't in the room. I left the mailrooms to go get my wipes to clean off the scanner glass. Was gone about 3 minutes. Came back to find the entire mailroom coated in toner, and a toner-covered coworker just standing there looking confused and alarmed. I didn't even ask. I just went to go get our boss to deal with it. I can only imagine how much of a pain it was to clean all of that up. Not gone per se, but asleep. I was flying LAX to SFO. My flight was delayed about 5 hours, so I did what any sensible frequent traveler does. I went to the club lounge and drank as much free bourbon as they would allow. We finally boarded the plane. I was in one of the first groups because, again, I fly a lot. So by the time we take off, I'm fast asleep. The captain comes on the intercom and says, "Don't panic, seatbelts on, etc." Drunkenly, I look out the window to see some smoke. And holy crap, there's smoke in the cabin? The lady next to me explains we've only been in the air 10 minutes and are about to make an emergency landing in Santa Barbara. Yeah, I'm sure that's a scary moment to wake up to. I fell asleep on the couch for like 10 minutes, I swear. Woke up to mayhem. 2 toddlers had scribbled all over the walls. The younger one had begun scribbling with crayon, and the older one, 3, became upset he was breaking the rules. So she grabbed a pencil and began marking giant X's as large as she could make. "You can't draw here, or here, or here." I woke up to the entire first floor covered in pencil X's and crayon scribbles everywhere. I have a 2-year-old. The other day, I ran to the bathroom and he was sitting down, pacified with Daniel Tiger and homemade trail mix. I came back, probably 2 minutes later, to find a mushroom cloud of flour and him standing on top of a bookshelf with a closed jar of peanut butter and covered in flour. Sounds like he was trying to make a sandwich or something. Several years ago, I was in the process of making dinner and had left a plate of flour tortillas on the kitchen bar. Went out to the garage with my husband for about 90 seconds to look at something. I hear a very loud thud from the kitchen. That thud was our dog jumping down off the bar, and he was now standing in the middle of the kitchen, wolfing down flour tortillas like they were going out of style. What makes it funny is that our bar is about 42 inches high, and the dog was a basset hound. A frickin' fat, stubby-legged basset hound. To this day, we still can't figure out how he got up there, or how he got down without breaking a leg. Hey, if a dog smells food, it'll find a way. Back in grade 11, I had my friend and his girlfriend come over to hang out on a night that my parents weren't home. The worst part was that we weren't drinking. We were all playing Mario Party. I got up and went to the bathroom for literally 30 seconds. I come back and they're completely naked and screwing on my bed. That's just rude. I actually have that moment to my friends. I was outside at a house party and needed to pee. There was someone in the bathroom, so I told my friends I was going to go around the side of the house to pee where no one could see. A few minutes later, I come back all bloody and dirty, and they're freaking out. What I didn't know was there was a steep ditch right next to the house. Being a female, if I pee outside, I try to support myself by doing a sort of wall sit so I don't wind up peeing on my legs or clothes. So I pulled down my pants and tried to do the wall sit on the side of the house. I was crazy drunk, so I lost my balance due to the incline of the ditch. I scraped myself up on the brick wall trying to catch myself and tumbled pants down in the ditch. I pulled myself up, went back to my friends and said, "I think it's time for me to go home." This happened just last night. After putting the kids to bed and having a bit of a workout, my wife told me to shower off and get to the bedroom. I jumped in the shower, scrubbed up, rinsed, and was out in a matter of minutes. She was already asleep. There's nothing more fun than trying to go to sleep once the launch sequence has been initiated. Yeah, that's one way to put it. Years back, I had a little thing celebrating my new apartment. Just a few close friends and a couple of not so close friends. We're having a good time, drinks were being had, and eventually the need for greasy takeout food was too strong to ignore. Everyone was pretty marinated, some more than others, but driving was out of the question. Me and my bro take everyone's orders and we stroll to the taco place around the corner. When we return, most everyone is on the porch having smokes. Everything seemed normal. When I walk into the apartment, there he is, we'll call him Waldo, passed out on my couch. Vomit running down the side of his face, vomit dripping down my new couch, vomit on my brand new rug. Apparently, when we left, they started chugging whiskey, which obviously didn't agree with old Waldo. I only went for tacos. So my wife is pregnant right now. First trimester is pretty exciting. We were at our friend's house and I was helping my bro cook some burgers. My wife was hanging out in the kitchen with my buddy's wife and was holding their baby. I'm walking back and forth between the grill and the kitchen. Get a fork, get a plate, get that seasoning, that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm in and out of the kitchen for less than a minute and see my wife puking into their kitchen sink, with the entire front of her clothes covered in baby poop. I guess their baby decided to drop the mother of all poop bombs right in my wife's lap. First trimester, so she's totally sensitive to smells and whatnot, but she totally lost all of her cookies right in front of everyone at our friend's house. I guess the baby was just trying to get her ready for what it's gonna be like. He had good intentions. That Super Bowl where Janet Jackson was topless. Well, lucky me, I had to pee right before the halftime fiasco because it was getting really boring. As I'm peeing, everybody starts screaming and hooting, and I had a mini heart attack and peed on the back of the toilet. Now, anytime I feel myself get bored, I think about that day, and it forces me to stick through the boredom in case there's suddenly boobies. My girls were like 4 and 6 years old. One summer evening, I left them at home with their dad while I ran to the store to pick up a few things. I couldn't have been gone more than an hour. When I pull into the driveway and get out of the car, I can hear both girls screaming and their dad roaring. I sigh and straighten my shoulders and walk into the house, braced for whatever disaster is awaiting me. I go through the front door, round the corner, and see my husband lying in the hallway holding his head. His roars have subsided to a painful groaning. I hear scuffling behind the girl's closed bedroom door. I step over my husband's prone form and burst into the bedroom to catch the girls in the process of climbing out their bedroom window. I got everyone settled down and finally got the story out of them. It seems my husband thought it would be hilarious to scare the girls. So he got out the scream mask, put it on, and tiptoed down the hallway. He stuck his head through the half-open door, and before he could make any scary sound, the 6-year-old glanced up and saw him, and immediately leapt to her feet and slammed the door, pinning his head. When he recoiled from that impact, he staggered backward, cracking the back of his head on our bedroom doorframe and collapsed to the floor. The girls were planning to escape next door. The moral of the story is don't mess with defenseless little girls. Sometimes they'll mess you up. You know what? I'd be pretty darn proud of my little girls in this situation. Baby powder everywhere. I'm talking in the silverware drawer, under the couch, inside the couch, on top of the picture frames. It clogged and broke the vacuum. I slipped on a thin layer of it trying to get the vacuum out of the closet. Baby powder on tile is very dangerous. I hate baby powder. I wanted to try tattooing. I bought a gun and was practicing on some oranges and stuff. I had some friends come over and one of them volunteered to get a simple little bomb done on him. I did it and it turned out good. I went out for a smoke break for 5 minutes and then came back in to the rest of the guys tattooing themselves with the same needle. One of them tattooed a circle on their arm by literally holding it like a child holds a crayon and just did overlapping circles. And the other tattooed his ex-wife's name across his forearm in a similar fashion. Started okay, but slowly got bigger and worse near the end of the name. Serious WTF moment. Oh, the worst part of that story is them reusing the same needle. That's just a bad idea no matter what. You want to give yourself a stupid tattoo, that's entirely up to you, but at least use a fresh needle. A regular day in the gym. I was working out my back. A couple of guys were doing flat bench and hanging out. I had to go take a leak and was gone for 2 minutes tops. Come back to see one of the guys sporting a pec tear with a spectacular purple bruise blossoming on it. He was crying, practically bawling while a doc tended to him. Turns out, while ego benching, he tried to do 405 and paid the price. I was at work and I went outside to grab a smoke. I come back in and one of the receptionists that I had a crush on is blushing and everyone else is laughing. I ask what happened and they let me know that she got her belly button pierced the night before and wanted to show everyone but was wearing a dress. She decided to flip up her dress to show everyone anyway and forgot that she wasn't wearing any underwear. I wanted my wife to have a good morning, so I made breakfast for her. It was pancakes with her favorite syrup and a glass of orange juice. I thought it would be nice for her to be able to eat it in bed, so I woke her up and brought her the tray. I realized I forgot a napkin, so turn around to go get one. And as soon as I make it out of the room, I hear silverware hitting together and a really sad voice say, "Oh, come back." I turn around and there's orange juice everywhere, pancakes on the bed, and she's looking at me like I did something wrong. Evidently, she'd reached for a Kleenex and her juice started tipping on the tray, and she panicked and overcompensated. Trying to make her day nice made it awful. Story of my wife's life. Well, hey, it was a nice thought, at least you were trying. You can't account for that. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching and we'll see you guys next time.